Xin nồng nhiệt chào đón quý vị đại biểu, các vị khách quý và toàn thể quý vị đã cùng tới dự hội thảo thúc đẩy
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to
vận tải phối hợp với chương trình phát triển của Liên Hợp Quốc
Accelerating Transition to Electric Vehicles. Welcome all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, at the event today, it is our honor to welcome our guest of honor. From the host, I would like to introduce Mr. Lê Anh Tuấn, Vice Minister of Transport.
Xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Watanabe.
Mr. Watanabe Shige, Deputy Ambassador of Japan to Vietnam. Mr. Patrick Haverman, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Vietnam. From our guests, I would like to introduce Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, the coordinator of our program today, former Vice Chairman of the National Traffic Safety Committee, Mr. Nguyễn Bá Kiên, Editor-in-Chief of the Traffic News, Mr. Trần Hoài Anh, Vice Chief of Technical Infrastructure Department, Mr. Phạm Minh Thành, Vice Chief of Vietnam Register, Associate Professor Lê Anh Tuấn, Chair of the Council of Hà Nội University of Science and Technology, Associate Professor Vũ Ngọc Khiêm, Chair of the Council of the Transport Technology University, Mr. Ron Slangen, Country Director of ADD. Joining us today, it is our honor to welcome our representative from Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Industry and Trade, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Construction, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Ministry of Science and Technology, leaders of Departments of Transportation of Hà Nội, Hồ Chí Minh City, Thừa Thiên Huế, Hà Tĩnh, Lạng Sơn, Quảng Ninh, and Hải Phòng, representatives of international organizations, research institutes, universities and colleges, EV and motorcycle and vehicle manufacturers in Vietnam, and 30 members of press. So I would like to once again welcome all of you to our workshop, our national policy dialogue today. Ladies and gentlemen, accelerating the transition to electric vehicles is an important step towards achieving net zero by 2050, according to the government's COP26 commitment. Our event today is an important platform so that we can together discuss the action plan to achieve emissions reduction, environmental pollution reduction in the transport sector and relevant sectors. Our event today is live streamed through our Zoom webinar and our platform of transport news and different channels of transport news on social media. To kickstart our event today, it is our great honor to welcome on stage Mr. Lê Anh Tuấn, Vice Minister of Transport, to deliver his opening remarks. His Excellency Watanabe Shige, Deputy Ambassador of Japan to Vietnam, Mr. Patrick Haverman, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and representatives of the press and media at central and local levels, climate change and environmental protection caused by exhaust and emissions from vehicles have become an urgent problem. Across countries in the world, e-mobility is considered a solution to reducing emissions and air pollution. Depending on the actual context of each and every country, they apply a different roadmap towards the mainstreaming of e-mobility. In Vietnam, green economy is an inevitable trend, and the aspiration that we're striving for to implement our resolution of the 13th Party Congress and our 10-year social economic development strategy 2021-2030 and the 5-year social economic development plan 2021-2025. The goal is to also create opportunities for Vietnam to lead the region in terms of green growth, green recovery, keeping up with the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, like other ASEAN member states, over the years, Vietnam has released a number of incentives and support policies towards e-mobility manufacturers and assemblers, as well as consumers, in order to achieve a green transition in the transport sector. Aside from opportunities, there remain challenges. For example, the lack of the charging infrastructure, the high cost of e-mobility, and incentives for consumers, or the lack of awareness among agencies and enterprises about green transition. Ladies and gentlemen, as a state management authority over transportation, over recent years, Ministry of Transport has been actively reviewing and advising to the government a number of policies to promote the mainstreaming of e-mobility. For example, the decision 876 dated the 22nd of July 2022, approving the National Action Plan on Green Transition, reduction of carbon and methane emissions in the transport sector. We have also compiled a report to provide recommendations in the area of transition to e-mobility and recommendations to improve and refine our policy frameworks on incentives towards manufacturers and consumers, as well as the development of infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, Ministry of Transport always appreciates input from expert scientists, researchers, and enterprises regarding how we can promote e-mobility in the transport sector so that we can protect the environment and make it easier for traffic participants. We highly appreciate the initiative taken by the Transport News and UNDP for organizing the event today so that state regulators and businesses can together discuss the existing policy framework as well as the future policies and incentives that can be put in place to promote the mainstreaming of electric vehicles. With that, I would like to declare the opening of our policy dialogue today. I wish all of you good health and a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee Anh-gun, Vice Minister of Transportation, for your opening remarks. Now it is my great honor to welcome on stage Mr. Watanabe Shige, Deputy Ambassador of Japan to Vietnam, for the welcome remarks. Kính thưa ông Lê
Watanabe Shige, Phó Đại sứ quán Nhật Bản. Thay mặt chính phủ Nhật Bản, tôi xin có đôi lời phát biểu bằng tiếng Anh. Climate change is currently one of the most important issues which the international community has to address. Japan is actively tackling with this issue, and in particular this year, as the G7 chair country, Japan is leading the discussion on this issue in the G7 framework. especially at the G7 Hiroshima Summit meeting in May, which Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh also attended. I believe that the Vietnamese government also recognizes the urgency to address climate change because Vietnam is suffering from natural disasters such as droughts, floods, and others that appear to be the result of climate change every year in recent years. At COP26, Prime Minister Chinh announced the goal of achieving zero emissions by 2050. We understand that the most important task for the Vietnamese government is to achieve this goal by promoting GX and at the same time to achieve economic growth to become a developed country by 2045. The Japanese government cooperated with the Vietnamese government in the formulation of National Climate Change Strategy, NCCS, by presenting a picture of Vietnamese society in 2050 based on the emission reduction scenarios created using the AIM model as a simulation model developed by Japan. The Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida Fumio, has initiated the cooperation framework called Asian Zero Emission Community, AZEC, which aims to achieve carbon neutrality of Asian countries by realistic measures in accordance with the actual conditions of each Asian country. The measures for AZEC include energy co-firing or conversion, such as biomass, ammonia and hydrogen, and CCUS technologies. And I'm happy to announce that last month, Vietnam and Japan has launched the working team, which aims to achieve carbon neutrality in Vietnam under the framework of AZEC. In addition, Japanese government also will provide support to Vietnam under the framework of Just Energy Transition Partnership, JETP, which has a complementary relationship with AZEC. 1 year and 8 months have passed since the start of this e-mobility project, and the various effective programs have been implemented so far, which has contributed to achieving the goal of NCCS and NDC by creating policies and developing a support framework to promote decarbonization in the transportation sector through supporting the work of the Vietnamese government and private sector. At today's workshop, Hanoi City, as well as Vietnamese government agencies, will identify challenges and discuss policies to be taken to promote e-mobility in Vietnam. While listening to the opinion of domestic and foreign experts in this field, I'm confident that today's discussion will also contribute to the promotion of e-mobility and to the achievement of carbon neutrality in Vietnam. The Japanese government will continue to contribute to the decarbonization of Vietnam through cooperation in this project and through various measures such as those I mentioned earlier. Finally, I'd like to conclude my remarks by wishing the success of today's workshop and this e-mobility project, and the good health and happiness of all those present. Thank you. Xin chào. Còn cảm ơn quý vị.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Watanabe Shige, công sứ Phó Đại sứ Nhật Bản tại Việt
Mr.
Nam.
Watanabe Shige, Deputy Ambassador of Japan to Vietnam. Next up, it is our honor to welcome on stage Mr. Patrick Haberman, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Vietnam, for his welcome remarks.
Excellency, Mr. Le Tuan, the Vice Minister of Transport, the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Japanese Embassy, Mr. Watanabe Sige, distinguished representative from ministries, electric vehicle manufacturers, development partners, academic institutions and professional associations. Xinjiao and a good morning to all. So on behalf of the UNEP, I'm very happy to join the Vice Minister and welcome you all to this important event on national policy dialogue and accelerating to the transition to electric vehicles. Strong political commitment from government and engagement of the private sector is a critical factor towards enabling the switch to emission-free electric vehicles. The government has made significant efforts in introducing relevant high-level frameworks, such as the decision 876 in July 2022. But more ambitious policies are needed to concretize existing targets and incentivize stakeholders to achieve them. It's also very encouraging to see that under the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the government and the JETP members are committed to making new green investments opportunities for the development of electric vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, the transportation sector accounted for 8 gigatons or 23% of all the greenhouse gases in 2022. Vietnam's transportation sector has mirrored the global trends with an estimated 37 metric tons of CO2 in 2020 and a continuous upwards trajectory. Yet Vietnam's mitigation of the transportation sector emissions is important to the achievement of its updated NDC. Globally, over 80 governments have heightened their policy focus promoting electric vehicle adaptation, with measures such as subsidies, tax breaks, and charging infrastructure investments. As a result, in 2022, over 26 million electric vehicles have hit the road globally, up 60% from the previous years. Markets in the United States, Europe, and neighboring China continue to exhibit a robust growth, as evidence of emerging global demand for domestic electric vehicle manufacturing. VinFast, a domestic champion, exported its first batch of electric vehicles to the United States last year. Also, Japan has set a target of 150,000 public charging points, as well as a 20 to 30% share of battery EVs and plug-in hybrids EVs by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam's EV fleet has risen dramatically. There were only 167 cars in 2021. And now we have more than 12,000 electric vehicles on the roads. And as well, the electric motorbikes, where I'm a proud owner of one of it, we have 2 million electric motorbikes on the roads in Vietnam. As indicators of progress, also electric buses have expanded in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Electric taxi services have begun operations in 6 major cities. And we are piloting electric vehicles for the last mile delivery services in Hue City. And it will be expanded in other cities. Complementing these efforts, Vietnam domestic electric automobile industry has also embarked on an ambitious mission to establish a comprehensive ecosystem for electric vehicle deployment, encompassing charging infrastructure and battery solutions. Additionally, VinFast has achieved as well a listing on the Nasdaq Global Select Market. To decarbonize the transportation sector and promote e-mobility in Vietnam, I would like to highlight a few key points for discussion for today. First, enabling the rapid growth of Vietnam's EV fleet across various vehicle categories may pose significant challenges, such as increased demand for critical minerals and a potential grid congestion. Policy framework should foster a holistic approach to incentivize electric vehicle adoption through encouraging knowledge sharing, as well as promoting social and environmentally responsible sourcing practices of the critical materials. Secondly, the government needs to accelerate the development of fundamental infrastructure, such as a network of charging stations, tightening emission standards of vehicles, and sales mandates for automakers to produce or sell certain percentages of EVs, among other considerations. Further, short-term measures such as preferential parking treatment and favorable zoning regulation could exceed the achievement of Vietnam's existing targets. Third, it's crucial to make electric vehicles affordable for consumers and for businesses. A variety of policy options exist, such as tax rebates, access to low-interest loans, and purchase subsidies. These solutions have also been demonstrated to shift social norms as a powerful motivator to address cultural perceptions and contribute to the behavioral change. In a constrained fiscal environment, Vietnam is commended for having made some progress on this front, providing a reduced tax for the BEV cars and buses. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will be listening to several important presentations and panel discussions regarding policies to promote the transition to e-mobility, as well as create an enabling environment for electric vehicle manufacturers to develop a successful domestic EV industry in Vietnam. We would like to extend our appreciation to the Minister of Transport as a partner in this event, the Embassy of Japan, and all stakeholders for joining us in this policy forum today and working towards decarbonization of Vietnam's transportation sector. We look forward to an open, informative engagement as we drive forwards a future with net zero. Thank you very much. Xin cảm ơn.
Xin chào cảm ơn ông Patrick Haberman. Và kính thưa quý vị, trước khi bắt đầu phiên đầu
Thank you
tiên,
very much, Mr. Patrick Haberman. Before we kickstart our first session today, I would like to invite all of you to go to the stage to take a family photo before we start our series of panel discussions and presentations. So if you guys, ladies and gentlemen, please proceed to the stage. Once again, I would like to invite our guest speakers, our panelists, our guests of honor. Please proceed to the stage to take a group photo together. A big round of applause to extend our gratitude to the leaders, the speakers, our guests of honor. I wish all of you a successful event. Thank you very much. The transition to e-mobility. Before listening to a series of presentations, please have a look at the screen to watch a short video clip on efforts to reducing emissions and accelerating the transition to electric vehicles in Vietnam.
Tại COP26, Việt Nam đã có những cam kết mạnh mẽ cùng 147 quốc gia, cam kết đưa mức phát thải ròng về không vào giữa thế kỷ. Để góp phần hiện thực hóa những cam kết tại COP26, Thủ tướng Chính phủ đã ký quyết định 876 QĐ-TTG phê duyệt chương trình hành động về chuyển đổi năng lượng xanh, giảm phát thải khí carbon và khí metan của ngành giao thông vận tải. Với những ưu điểm trong lĩnh vực tiêu thụ nhiên liệu, cắt giảm phát thải khí thải, phát triển phương tiện giao thông điện được đánh giá là một trong những ưu tiên quan trọng góp phần cho quá trình chuyển dịch năng lượng ngành giao thông vận tải. Việt Nam đã ban hành các chính sách ưu đãi, hỗ trợ cho ngành sản xuất lắp ráp và sử dụng ô tô điện, trong đó phải kể đến chính sách giảm thuế tiêu thụ đặc biệt hay giảm lệ phí trước bạ đối với ô tô điện chạy pin đăng ký lần đầu. Tại Nghị định số 57 năm 2020 NDCP ngày 25 tháng 5 năm 2020, Chính phủ cũng đã bổ sung quy định doanh nghiệp sản xuất lắp ráp ô tô điện được tham gia vào chương trình ưu đãi thuế nhập khẩu 0% đối với linh kiện ô tô nhập khẩu trong nước chưa sản xuất được. Để thực hiện chương trình hành động về chuyển đổi năng lượng xanh, ngành giao thông vận tải theo lộ trình tại quyết định 876. Mới đây, Bộ Giao thông Vận tải đã có văn bản báo cáo Chính phủ đề xuất khung chính sách về hỗ trợ, thúc đẩy phát triển xe điện với nhiều kiến nghị chính sách được dư luận quan tâm. Ngoài các đòn bẩy từ chính sách tài chính, hệ thống quy chuẩn, tiêu chuẩn kỹ thuật liên quan đến phát triển và sử dụng ô tô điện cũng đã và đang được xây dựng, hoàn thiện. Nhiều quy hoạch hạ tầng ngành hoặc thành phố cũng đang từng bước xem xét lồng ghép các giải pháp kỹ thuật nhằm khuyến khích phát triển giao thông điện. Tuy nhiên, nếu so sánh với các nước trong khu vực hay trên thế giới, những chính sách cho xe điện tại Việt Nam cũng còn khiêm tốn. Trong đó, các chính sách hỗ trợ đem lại hiệu quả nhanh chóng nhất là chính sách trợ giá như hỗ trợ về tín dụng, đầu tư, thương mại dành cho doanh nghiệp hoạt động trong lĩnh vực xe điện gần như chưa có. Việc thiếu các bộ tiêu chuẩn, quy chuẩn về hạ tầng trạm sạc, pin, thiếu các quy hoạch về trạm sạc xe điện hay khung pháp lý để triển khai hạ tầng trạm sạc cũng là những rào cản cần sớm khắc phục.
Có 3 cái nhóm giải pháp chính mà Bộ Công Thương đã đề xuất lên Chính phủ. Thì cái nhóm giải pháp thứ nhất là ưu đãi các cái dự án mà sản xuất lắp ráp xe điện. Còn cái thứ hai là chúng tôi sẽ rà soát lại các chính sách hiện nay để dần dần từng bước để hạn chế sử dụng cái dòng xe sử dụng cái nhiên liệu hóa thạch. Và cái nữa là cuối cùng tức là các chính sách về chuyển giao công nghệ trong các lĩnh vực sản xuất xe điện và những linh kiện phụ tùng.
Theo lộ trình tại quyết định 876, đến năm 2040 sẽ từng bước hạn chế tiến tới dừng sản xuất, lắp ráp và nhập khẩu các loại xe sử dụng nhiên liệu hóa thạch và đến năm 2050, 100% phương tiện giao thông cơ giới đường bộ, xe máy thi công tham gia giao thông chuyển đổi sang sử dụng điện, năng lượng xanh.
Để hướng tới mục tiêu giảm phát thải khí nhà kính về không vào năm 2050, Bộ Giao thông Vận tải đã tham mưu trình Thủ tướng Chính phủ ở quyết định 876 phê duyệt chương trình hành động chuyển đổi năng lượng xanh, giảm phát thải khí carbon, khí methane của ngành giao thông vận tải. Vừa qua thì sau khi nghiên cứu kinh nghiệm quốc tế, trao đổi với các bộ, ngành và doanh nghiệp, thì Bộ Giao thông Vận tải cũng đề xuất Thủ tướng Chính phủ khung chính sách tổng thể hỗ trợ chuyển đổi sang ô tô điện, bao gồm khuyến khích sản xuất, lắp ráp, nhập khẩu, hỗ trợ người tiêu dùng và phát triển hạ tầng sạc điện. Ngoài ra thì Bộ Giao thông Vận tải cũng rà soát và cập nhật các tiêu chuẩn, quy chuẩn cho xe điện, hy vọng rằng sẽ có một hệ sinh thái xe điện hoàn chỉnh, có phần thúc đẩy mạnh mẽ hơn nữa giao thông sử dụng điện, năng lượng xanh.
Tuy vậy, để đạt được mục tiêu của chương trình hành động về chuyển đổi năng lượng xanh, đòi hỏi sự phối hợp giữa các bộ ngành, giữa chính phủ và các đối tác phát triển, các bên liên quan khác của khu vực tư nhân cho một mục tiêu chung là tăng trưởng xanh và bền vững hơn. UNDP hiện nay đang triển khai nhiều dự án chuyển dịch năng lượng phù hợp với cam kết thực hiện chương trình chuyển đổi năng lượng công bằng của Việt Nam. Cụ thể hơn, chúng tôi đang thực hiện dự án cùng sự hỗ trợ của chính phủ Nhật Bản với mục tiêu thúc đẩy phát triển giao thông điện. Ở cấp quốc gia, chúng tôi đang phối hợp với Bộ Giao thông Vận tải, Bộ Khoa học Công nghệ, Bộ Tài nguyên và Môi trường, hỗ trợ phát triển chính sách, kế hoạch hành động, tiêu chuẩn kỹ thuật và nâng cao năng lực nhằm tạo môi trường thuận lợi cho phát triển giao thông xanh. Hoạt động thí điểm ở cấp thành phố đã có một số sáng kiến thú vị. Chúng tôi đang phối hợp với Huế, Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, Tuy Hòa và Quy Nhơn hỗ trợ thí điểm sử dụng năng lượng mặt trời tại các trạm sạc xe điện. Chúng tôi cũng đang xem xét đến phát triển hệ thống xe đạp điện chia sẻ. Đến nay đã có 200 xe máy điện được mua từ thí điểm khoản vay ưu đãi của UNDP. Chúng tôi hy vọng sẽ có thêm 300 xe máy điện tiếp tục được mua từ hoạt động này trong vòng 6 tháng tới. Để thúc đẩy giao thông bằng điện, chắc chắn không phải là nhiệm vụ của riêng một cơ quan hay địa phương nào, mà phải là sự chung tay, kiến tạo của cả một hệ thống chính trị. Theo ý kiến của nhiều chuyên gia, điều quan trọng nhất là có khung chính sách rõ ràng, thống nhất để thúc đẩy các khoản đầu tư từ các doanh nghiệp, khối tư nhân, các ngân hàng phát triển, các thể chế tài chính vào xây dựng hệ sinh thái xe điện để đảm bảo người dân lựa chọn việc sử dụng xe điện là một nhu cầu cá nhân và đóng góp cho các lợi ích xã hội, môi trường khác.
Distinguished guests, this video has reflected the situation of using electric vehicle in Vietnam, as well as the challenges that we are encountering. And this is also the topic of the first session of our today's workshop. First, we are going to listen to the presentation from Mr. Phạm Hoài Trung, Deputy Director of the Transport Development and Strategy Institute. He's going to deliver his presentation on overview of solutions and actions to promote electric vehicle development in Vietnam. The floor is yours, Mr. Trung. Mr. Lê Anh Tuấn, Deputy Minister of Transport. Mr. Watabe, Deputy Ambassador of Japanese Deputy Ambassador to Vietnam, Mr. Patrick Haberman from UNDP. Ladies and gentlemen, guest speakers, experts, and managers who have been present in this venue today on behalf of the Institute for Transport Development, allow me to present about a very important topic, which is promoting overview of solutions and actions to promote EV development in Vietnam. My presentation will consist of three main parts. First, I'm going to evaluate the current situation of EV development in Vietnam. Secondly, we are going to hear about some current program solutions and actions to promote electric vehicle development in Vietnam. And the third part of my presentation will be about proposal on policy framework for supporting the transition to electric vehicles in Vietnam. This morning, I also used an electric vehicle to try to move from my house to the venue today. I used the Catlin railway system to commute to Pullman Hotel today. So about the background of the current situation of EV development in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about air pollution in Vietnam. In Vietnam, air pollution is one of the countries with highest PM, average PM in the world and in the region. Our emission has been 7 times or 10 times higher than the required standards. In Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, and Indonesia are suffering from having high percentage of PM 2.5 according to the evaluation. So in terms of vehicle growth rate, in recent years, we have seen a very high proportion of car users which is 13.3% per year. So this has led to serious air pollution in Vietnam. Furthermore, personal cars is also in the increase with a proportion of 17.2% per year. And this proportion for motorcycles is 9.3% with 72 million registered motorcycles. And this number has not reflected all the motorcycles still in Vietnam. And in terms of greenhouse gas emission, according to the statistics in Vietnam, transportation accounts for 17.8% of the energy sector, which is equivalent to 30.5 million tons of CO2. If we do not have transition to electric vehicles by 2030, 88.1 million tons of CO2 will be released into the environment. This is a burning issue that requires us to have more drastic action for transition to electric vehicles. In the video that we have just watched, Vietnam is committing to the COP26 on net zero by 2015. In COP27, we continue to have strong commitment toward COP27, and many ministries and departments are putting into great effort to achieve this goal. In the transport sector, we are also have a lot of programs on achieving about green energy projects, and we also have some issues and regulations on this, and this has acted as a foundation for us to for transition to green energy. So you can see from this slide, you can see that Vietnam has made a lot of commitments to greenhouse gas emission in reduction. For example, in 2015, we commit to reduce 8% of total GHG emissions by 2030. By 2030, we will reduce by 8%, and we will reduce 25% of total GHG emission by 2030 with international support. However, in 2020 and 2022, we can see that we have made stronger commitment. We increase the percentage of total GHG emission reduced to 9% with domestic resources, and the proportion with international support is 27% in 2020 and 43.5% in 2022. These data and statistics have demonstrated the effort of the government and relevant ministries and departments in achieving net zero goal. For transportation, we have the following solutions to reduce GHG emissions. First, the first group of solutions is about efficient use of energy. E70 limitation of fuel consumption for automobile manufacturer assembled and newly imported. E22 increase the load factor of cars, and this can help increase the efficient use of energy in transportation of goods and commodities. The second group of solution is about conversion of modes of transportation. The Ministry of Transport and localities have put into a lot of effort to convert passenger transportation from personal vehicles to public vehicles, for example, electric buses. And we also convert means of transport from road to rail and convert road transport to inland waterways and coastal roads. Inland waterways and coastal roads have contributed to releasing the burden on road transport. So nearly 40%, the proportion, 49% of transportation is from interland and waterways, 50% from road. And we can see that Vietnam is trying to develop different modes of transportation using green energy. The third group of solution is switching to using electricity and green energy. In this group solution, we will use CNG buses, biofuels, electric cars, electric motorbikes, and electric buses. And localities across Vietnam is actively participating in different programs on developing electric vehicles that use green energy. About the reality of private electric vehicles development, that is, in terms of the increased speed of car development, the proportion is 13.3% per year, and there are about 5 million cars being used in Vietnam, in which there are 20,000 electric vehicles. The number of electric cars manufactured, assembled, and registered and licensed is a lot, and there are a lot of domestic corporations are interested in producing electric vehicles like VinFast, TNT, and in the future there will be a new corporation, the Galaximico Group, with a Chinese corporation will cooperate to produce electric vehicles. VinFast has set up 1,100 charging stations, and this number is going to be increased in the future. And EVN is also involved in the project on developing charging stations in Vietnam. So their participation is very critical to the development of charging station, thereby developing the use of electric vehicles in Vietnam. Or in order to implement decision 876, 100% of buses used in Vietnam will have to be electric buses. We have great demand. However, the resources is limited in many localities. But currently, we only have 239 electric buses in Hanoi City and 167 electric buses in Ho Chi Minh City. And we also have several electric buses in Phu Quoc. So it is necessary for Vietnam to replace unconventional buses with electric buses, and it requires great resources from Vietnam. In terms of electric taxis, we have witnessed the introduction of SM taxi, green SM taxi, and we have nearly 2,700 electric taxis operated in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Nha Trang, Khánh Hòa provinces, and many other provinces. And the demand for electric buses will continue to expand to other localities. So electric taxis is going to be is going to receive the attention from different organizations and corporations. And about the incentive policies for the development of electric vehicles, as we have heard from the previous video, Vietnam is having a special policy on reducing consumption tax for electric vehicles. And solar-powered vehicles is also subject to this special consumption tax policy. Electric cars powered by solar energy, passengers or fuel is 50%. Passenger vehicles between 10 seats and under 16 seats as 10%. Passenger vehicles of 16 seats and under 24 seats are 5%. And vehicles that carry both people and goods are 10%. And we also have another policy, incentive policy on registration fees. We introduced a lot of preferential policies for the introduction of and development of lithium batteries and batteries with long duration, and they belong to the list of products that are under the that are subject to preferential policies. So, for example, electric vehicles are exempt from registration fees for the first 3 years and receive a 50% reduction in registration fees for the following 2 years. So these policies have actively accelerated the transition to green vehicles in Vietnam. And besides implementing international commitments, Vietnam has also constructed a national program on implementation in COP26, and the Institute for Transportation Strategy and Development is also responsible for implementing a national program for development of electric vehicle transportation. And we are in the second year of implementing this program. And next, we are implementing a program on green energy transition and reduction of carbon and methane emission. The Ministry of Transport is compiling the results, the implementation results of this program to develop the action plan for the future. And next, we have also introduced a lot of policies for net zero emission, and the Ministry of Transport is proactively taking actions to realize these goals. In terms of the roadmap for green energy transition, for road transportation, according to this roadmap, we will convert by 2025. We will develop a sufficient number of transport charging stations to meet the demand of users. By 2030, we will develop a charging infrastructure and by 2040, we'll stop using fossil fuels. And by 2050, we'll make sure that 100% of vehicles will use electric and green energy for charging infrastructure. We will meet the demand of everyone across the country. For urban transportation, 100% of buses in urban areas will be replaced by green energy and electric vehicles. This is a challenge, a big challenge for the localities, because at the moment we are having a large number of vehicles using diesel fuel. By 2030, 50% of buses will use electric and green energy. 100% of taxis will be replaced with electric and green energy, and electric taxis that use green energy. And by 2050, 100% of buses and taxis will use electric and green energy. So different localities should have programs, action programs to realize these goals. We have the following research projects on electric vehicle development. For example, we work with the industry, Ministry of Industry and Trade to integrate electric vehicle transition into the action programs, future action programs, as well as programs on electricity usage. Recently, we have worked with organizations and agencies operating in buses, and we have talked to them about different issues regarding green energy transition. And we found that it is very important for, we realized that the awareness of the localities in Vietnam is not sufficient, and they also need a lot of resources to accelerate the transition to green vehicle. So we hope that with different communication campaigns, we can mobilize more resources to support these localities to implement their commitment to green vehicle transition. At the moment, Vietnam is having diverse opportunities to implement the transition to electric vehicles. We have the substantial intense participation of the public and the private sector in manufacturing of green electric vehicles. Secondly, Vietnam is a potential market with significant possibilities for electric vehicle development. Our GDP has surpassed $3,000, and by 2030, we will reach $7,000. And these have reflected great possibilities for Vietnam to develop and invest in electric vehicles. And Vietnam is also following the international trend to invest in the production of electric vehicles, as well as batteries used for electric vehicles. The third opportunity is about the people's awareness on environmental protection. The awareness of people is increasing. The next opportunity is Vietnam's outstanding potential for the growth of renewable energy. We have diverse resource of wind and solar energy, so we can ensure sufficient amount of renewable energy. Besides the opportunities, we have encountered some difficulties and challenges as well. Although Vietnam has $3,000 in terms of GDP, however, we are still considered as a low middle income country. The second challenge is that the market for electric vehicles is still limited compared to the population of Vietnam. The third challenge is that EV ecosystem in Vietnam is in the beginning stage of development. This is a challenge, but also an opportunity for Vietnam. In terms of legal framework, we are trying to learn from international experience to develop our legal framework. However, we'll still have a long way to go. And the last difficulty is about the structure of renewable energy to the system total power source capacity is inadequate. So this is a big problem in urban areas that needs careful and thorough action program. And in my presentation, I also want to propose a policy framework to facilitate the transition to electric vehicles based on the research we have conducted so far. There are 4 groups of policies. First one is our incentives for promoting assembly, manufacturing, import. The second group of policy is for encourage and support users to use electric vehicles. The third policy group is about the development of electric charging station infrastructure. And the last policy group is about promotion of the development of public transportation using electricity. We have learned from international experience, especially from Japan, Finland, and Germany, to suggest these 4 policy groups. For assembly production, we need to review and supplement contents on policy prioritizing the development of electric vehicles. Although we have some incentive policies on tax exemption, etc., however, we still need to add more, supplement more articles, incentive policies for electric vehicles. Next, we need to develop and promulgate regulations to improve emission standards. And lastly, we need to review, update, and amend regulations on handling discarded electric vehicle batteries. In terms of finance and investment, we have to focus on the electric vehicle manufacturing industry and electric vehicle battery production. We also need to exempt tax for importing components for the manufacturing of electric vehicles and electric batteries. Besides, there are a lot of some other policies that you can see on the slide. In terms of technical and technological aspects, we should prioritize technology transfer and mobilize our resource into the production of batteries used for electric vehicles. We should provide import tax incentives for electric vehicles compared to conventional vehicles that use fossil fuels. Furthermore, we also have some incentive policies to encourage users to switch to electric vehicles. We focus on 2 main groups. In terms of finance, we can have some incentive policies for the users. And in terms of operation and management, we should focus more on, we should prioritize our resources to the development of electric vehicles. And we also have regulations for development of electric charging station infrastructure. In terms of regulations, we should introduce more up-to-date legal regulations that promote the electric charging station infrastructure. And in terms of finance, we should provide investment incentives and support for interest rates, land lease support, etc., for the manufacturers. And in terms of public passenger transportation using electric vehicles, localities have a lot of activities to do. We should reduce the number of personal vehicles used in big cities. Traffic congestion is a big problem nowadays. So we should focus on the development and the widespread use of public transport to avoid and to reduce the problem of traffic congestion in big cities in Vietnam. And lastly, I would like to propose some recommendations. And I look forward to receiving the comments and the feedbacks from different organizations and experts being present in the workshop today so that we can finalize our our national action program on the development of green vehicles. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Phạm Hoài Trung. Ladies and gentlemen, next on the agenda, we are going to listen to the presentation from Hanoi Department of Transport. The presentation is about orientation for transition to electric public transport in Hanoi City, and Mr. Vũ Quang Anh will deliver the presentation. This presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been assigned to present this topic on behalf of the Hanoi Department of Transport, and my presentation is about the orientation for transition to electric public transport in Hanoi City. My presentation will consist of two parts. First, I'm going to give you an assessment of current environmentally friendly public transport in Hanoi. And the second part of my presentation is about the development orientation according to the Green Energy Transport Transition Roadmap. So, as you may know, Hanoi is one of the cities which invest a lot of resources into the development of environmentally friendly public transport. For example, CNG bus has been operated since August, and we also have the urban rail number 2 coupling Hà Đông, which has been operated since 2021, and in April 2023, we also have some pilot projects on e-bikes and public bicycles, and these environmentally friendly vehicles, have demonstrated the effort of Hanoi in transition to electric vehicle, and these are very important solutions to develop transportation in a more sustainable manner. And we are going to replace vehicles that use diesel and other non-environmentally friendly energy to replace them with green vehicle energy. And in Hanoi, we have 154 bus routes, and of which 132 price subsidy routes, 8 without subsidy, 12 neighboring connection, and 2 city routes. And we have over 1,200 buses with emission standard Euro 4 upwards. And we can see there are a lot of data that you can see on the slide. And Hanoi City has invested our resource into the transition green energy vehicles. However, we still encounter some challenges. For example, the number of old vehicles still rather high, vehicles of over 5 years accounting for 39%. And buses currently are still using diesel fuel. And this has led to some consequences. For example, we have high volume emissions to the environment, and drivers are under a lot of workload because they have to continuously use manual gears and brakes. And only in Vietnam, only VinFast manufactures and assembles e-bus, and the current supply of electric buses in the world mainly comes from large Chinese firms such as Photon Yutong. So it will take a long time for us to select the suitable buses for Vietnam, and select suitable buses to Vietnam and increase the number of environmentally friendly buses operated in Vietnam. So we need the participation of EVN so that we can have sufficient amount of electricity for these electric vehicles. So we have contacted and cooperated with EVN as well as the Ministry of Industry and Trade on programs on provision of sufficient electricity as well as development of charging stations. And we need 3 to 5 years to upgrade our current electrical infrastructure to meet the demand of electricity of over 1,000 electric vehicles. So Vietnam Gas Corporation will ensure enough natural gas to serve the transport industry transition to green energy vehicles. To implement decision number 876 of the Prime Minister, from 2025, 100% of all buses will be replaced through new investment with electric and green energy ones. And from 2030, this proportion of vehicles using electricity and green energy will reach at least 50%. However, we still encounter some challenges that hinder us from implementing and achieving these goals. For example, the investment costs for electric and green energy vehicles are high, which is 2 or 4 times greater than diesel buses. Second, there is a great pressure on investment and low interest costs for transport businesses. So the cost for electric vehicles is $7 billion per vehicle, and the VinFast then vehicles produced by VinFast cost $7 billion per vehicle. So this will put great pressure on transport businesses and the subsidy costs as well. Furthermore, costs regarding the infrastructure investment costs and, for example, transformer station power supply system is also very high. And this is also a challenge for corporations and enterprises interested in electric vehicles, not to mention that enterprises have to pay for maintenance costs and training costs for drivers as well. Hanoi Department of Transport is also having subsidy costs for electric buses. So we have the regulations on subsidy costs for electric buses to so in order to develop to increase the use of electric buses in the urban areas, we have to care about subsidy costs, and it is also very difficult to operate buses in large scale. So in the future, in order to overcome these challenges, we have developed a roadmap for transition of green energy transport. So we have 3 principles of transition. First, we'll select and determine the appropriate structure between buses using electricity and buses using green energy to ensure suitability with actual conditions of infrastructure and supply capacity. And secondly, we are going to open new bus routes, which will prioritize the use of electric and green energy vehicles, prioritizing bus routes operating in central urban areas, historic inner cities area, and routes connecting to transport hubs, and to avoid disturbance in passenger travel and ensure efficiency in transport. And in order to effectively use the subsidy cost, we are going to have the following programs. This program will be divided into 2 phases. Phase number 1 from 2015 to 2030, the average transition rate is 7.73% per year. The second phase is from 2030 to 2035. The average transition rate is 8% per year, with the average number of transition vehicles is 262 vehicles per year. These are our ambition based on the current situation, and we are going to conduct more research on these solutions. So in order to implement the plan to transition to green energy vehicles, we are going to have to develop and formulate new policies, incentive policies. There are 4 groups of policies. First, review and complete the system of norms and unit prices for types of buses. Using electricity and green energy, organize bidding, ordering to provide public passenger transport services by bus. Secondly, continue to consider applying temporary unit prices and norms to place order for buses using electricity and green energy while waiting for the issuance of official norms and unit price. Third, consider the policy mechanism to extend the vehicle's use until the end of the contract service period and reduce the depreciation of unit price to the time of contract performance. In Hanoi, Well, the term for buses is 10 years. So we may increase this increase this to these terms so that it can create more favorable condition for us to implement the transition to green energy vehicles. And lastly, we will advise on issuing limit ceiling and procedures for borrowing capital, interest rate support to invest in vehicles, invest in infrastructure to serve public passenger transport by bus, and to realize the commitments in COP26. We look forward to the support for international corporations so that we can accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. And we want to learn from the international experience. And the Hanoi Department Transport is striving for is taking a lot of actions to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. So this is the presentation from the Hanoi Department of Transport and about the actions and activities that our department is implementing. Thank you so much for your attentive listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Đỗ Phan Anh, representing the Department of Transport of Hanoi. We've listened to two presentations. The first one on overview of solutions to mainstreaming e-mobility in Vietnam, delivered by Mr. Hai Chung from TDSI, and the second presentation was delivered by the representative of Hanoi Department of Transport on the orientation for e-mobility transition in Hanoi. Now let's start our first panel discussion on solutions to accelerating the transition to EVs. May I welcome on stage our panelists. I would like to welcome Mr. Trần Hoài Anh, Vice Chief of the Technical Infrastructure Agency, Mr. Nguyễn Văn Hội, Director General of Vietnam Institute of Strategy and Policy for Industry and Trade, Mr. Hoài Trung, Vice Chief of TDSI, Associate Professor Lê Anh Duẩn, Chair of the Council of Hanoi University of Science and Technology, HUST, Mr. Đào Xuân Lai, Chief of Environment and Climate Change, UNDP, Mr. Bích Ngọc from Tax Supervision, Ministry of Finance, Mr. Lê Hoài Linh from the Industry Department of Ministry of Industry and Trade. So may I once again welcome all the panelists on stage. I would like to also invite on stage Dr. Quách Việt Hùng, Vice Chairman of the National Traffic Safety Committee, to moderate our panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to welcome our moderator and our lineup of panelists joining our first panel discussion today. Welcome all of you. So I would like to thank our MC. I've been assigned as the organizer to moderate our first panel discussion. There are two panel discussions today. We actually started later than our original agenda, so may we delay our break, ladies and gentlemen. It's now 9:20, so let's complete our first discussion by 10. So 30 minutes or so. I'm gonna go straight to the point. We have the representatives of all agencies that we need here. And our first panel discussion will address solutions to accelerating the transition to EV. In the opening speech delivered by Vice Minister of Transport, he reaffirmed the core or the essential elements of Decision 876, and his presentation was followed by the opening remarks delivered by Deputy Ambassador of Japan to Vietnam, the Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP, as well as the presentation of a representative from TDSI and DOT of Hanoi. it's clear what we have to do, and we have already seen great results over the years. I have a number of questions, open-ended questions to our panelists, and may I first address Mr. Hoyt from the Institute of Strategy and Policy for Industry and Trade. We're working on a new auto industry development strategy with a vision to 2045. So may I ask you, Mr. Hoyt, as an agency that chairs the or leads the drafting of the strategy, what are the key components regarding e-mobility in this new strategy, this new auto industry development strategy, which will support our COP26 commitment? Over to you, Mr. Hoyt. Thank you very much, our moderator, Mr. Hùng. Ladies and gentlemen, in following the directions of the government, MOIT is working with relevant agencies to draft the National Auto Industry Development Strategy with a vision to 2045. We have already reviewed the current status, the status quo of the auto industry development over the years. In the time to come, apart from COP26 commitment, there are so many other bilateral and multilateral commitments in the auto industry that will have to fulfill. We are consulting relevant agencies and ministries on things that we can put in the strategy to meet these commitments. We are working our best to support the transition in the auto industry. The manufacturing of e-vehicles is the highlight in the time to come. We also want to focus on the supporting industries for the manufacturing of EVs, such as batteries. So batteries is an area that we're drawing investments to in order to support the overall development of EVs. Another sector that influences the auto industry is the development of the charging station and the grid. They both support the charging capacity and speed. So we are drawing attention and resources to all of these areas that back up the development of EVs. So these are the key highlights of the strategy for auto industry development in order to fulfill COP26 commitment, as well as other bilateral and multilateral commitments made by Vietnam. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyt, from the Vietnam Institute of Strategy and Policy for Industry and Trade. But could you please give us figures? Say how many percent of localization rate, how many percent of the market share that will be covered by domestic manufacturers? Well, we are still discussing. We're still discussing specific figures, so it's hard for me to tell you right now. It is certain that by the end of this year and early next year, we'll open the discussion to include everyone here. Whatever number I'm giving now on this platform will just be my personal prediction. In the time to come, we will improve the localization rate, including the localization of the car body. But what we're trying to do is to open a new market for EVs. In the past, there were things that really hard for us to localize, for example, auto parts. But in the time to come, as we strive to develop this market, we want new industries, especially the manufacturing of batteries and auto parts that can replace traditional and conventional auto parts of vehicles Of course, we will increase our localization rate up to 70 or 80% or at least 60%. The localization of the car body will not change much, in my opinion. How about Mr. Ling as a state management authority? I believe that you will give us clearer messages compared to researchers like me or Mr. Hui. Mr. Khuất Hùng, the Vice Chairman of the National Traffic Safety Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to add a few more details to clarify what Mr. Hui just stated. Mr. Hui mentioned how MOIT has been assigned by the government to draft a strategy for auto industry development with a vision to 2045, replacing our existing decision. And one of the most important components of this strategy is the development of EVs and environment-friendly vehicles in Vietnam. The industry department of MOIT is working very closely with CDSI and also MOIT to draft this strategy. As a state management authority, we hope that the strategy can highlight 2 points in auto industry development. First, what are the lines or EV products that will be relevant to Vietnam phase by phase? In the world, there are 4 EV products: hybrid, plug-in hybrid vehicle, BEV, that VinFast is producing BEVs. And there is another product that is a fuel cell vehicle. So these are 4 most common products, but there are other products that are in the process of R&D globally. We hope that the strategy will tell us a clear roadmap on what type of product we will develop in each and every phase based on Vietnam's COP26 commitment, as well as the roadmap on green energy transition and carbon and methane emissions reduction in decision 876, as well as the average income of our citizens, as well as the progress of developing charging stations in Vietnam. So that is the first key component that we're going to see in the new strategy for the auto industry. Second component, based on introducing a clear roadmap for the models phase by phase, what are the incentives or supportive policies that will be issued phase by phase, including tax, investment incentives, or incentives for EV projects in Vietnam, or incentives for consumers, such as reducing registration tax, reducing tolls, and developing the technical specifications and standards for charging stations, or incentives for R&D in the area of charging stations. So those are the 2 key components that we expect to see in the new strategy. And my addition to the speaker that spoke before me. Thank you very much, Mr. Ling, for a very good clarification and orientation for the time to come. By 2030, we have 7 years more to go, and we hope that this strategy will be finalized as soon as possible, because many cities are already committed to converting all of their vehicles to electric vehicles by 2025 or 2030. In Mr. Chung and other speakers' presentations, they have covered many tax incentives in the strategy for auto industry development. in the coming phase, financial incentives or policies are key. That's the reason why I would like to address Ms. Ngọc, Ms. Trần Thị Bích Ngọc from Ministry of Finance. In Thailand, for example, BEV projects are exempted from CIT for 5 or 8 years. Electric auto part manufacturers will be exempted from CIT for up to 10 years. So I wonder how Ministry of Finance will be involved in the development of the strategy for auto industry development, and are there any inclusions of taxing policies or financial incentives for EV producers? Thank you very much, our moderator and Your Excellency Lê Anh Tuấn, Vice Minister of Transport. Ladies and gentlemen, at the moment, tax policies will be approved by the National Assembly, including CIT policy. Ministry of Finance will draft the CIT policy, will then submit the draft to the National Assembly for passage. In the time to come, Ministry of Finance is going to revise the law on CIT, or the CIT policy. In the process, we will make sure to consult associations, industry associations, as well as international experiences, especially experiences of those countries where the industries that we are prioritizing are well developed. For example, we have compiled many international experiences and laws and reviewed them. They will inform our future policy making and help us convince the National Assembly. But I have to say that the law or the new policy on CIT will be, at the end of the day, passed by the National Assembly. With regards to green transition and EV mainstreaming, we always follow the overall direction and strategy and agenda of the party and the government, as well as the strategy for auto industry development. In that spirit, we will put out the most relevant policy that can make sure that Vietnam is as competitive as others. In Mr. Chung's presentation and Mr. Ho's sharing, he talked about how batteries will be prioritized. There is a battery factory that will be built, or it's being built in Ha Tĩnh province. Is there any policy for that one factory? Do you have any updates on this specific case? I have to assure you that battery is considered a high-tech industry, and high-tech industries will be entitled highest incentives. Whether in the future they will receive higher incentives or not, it depends on future policy directions. But I have to say, at the moment, just like computer manufacturers, battery manufacturers are given the highest incentives. But what are the incentives exactly? Ms. Ngọc, please, Ms. Bích Ngọc. I think the highest So exemption for 4 years and reduction for 9 years when it comes to CIT. That is, I believe, the highest incentive for high-tech industries in general. But aside from CIT incentives, there are many other incentives. So the import tariff, with auto parts or with parts that cannot be domestically produced, we will give manufacturers or importers really good incentives. But with parts that can be domestically produced, they will not be given high incentive or high import tariff reduction. When we can produce batteries or battery parts domestically, I believe that enterprises will expect Ministry of Finance to reduce our import tariffs, not increase import tariffs. Well, anyway, battery manufacturers are entitled to a highest incentives in all regards. Thank you very much, Ms. Ngọc. We hope that the messages from Ministry of Finance will incentivize and motivate investors who have already invested in EVs and batteries or hoping to produce EVs and batteries in Vietnam. Since last year, we have discussed extensively consumer subsidies or incentives. There are countries that are providing direct subsidies to consumers. There are countries that subsidize through sellers or manufacturers. In Thailand, consumers are subsidized at least 2,100 and Indonesia $5,000. I would like to address Associate Professor Lee Anh Tuấn, Chair of the Council of HUSD, Hanoi University of Science and Technology. In your opinion, how should the Vietnamese government support consumers directly or indirectly? Thank you very much, Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the transition from conventional vehicles to EVs, there are multiple approaches adopted by countries. How to encourage consumers or the citizens to change their vehicles to EVs? Well, the approaches vary by country, and it depends on the local context, I believe. Say, Vietnam has a policy to directly support vehicle owners, EV owners. It may not be as effective or it may not work in Vietnam because Vietnamese people tend to be trend followers. So when there is something new or a new trend, they will immediately jump on the bandwagon, and that will lead to an imbalance in the overall development of the auto industry. I say that is not the right approach right now, but maybe our incentives should be provided project-based. UNDP, for example, provide support to Hanoi City, and Hanoi City can use that source to support the citizens. It's hard to use the state budget for to subsidize our consumers or users. State budget should be used to fund research, R&D, but we can use international resources or external resources to subsidize our users or consumers. Ministry of Finance has issued many great financial incentives, for example, lower import tariffs or lower special consumption tax. We have a separate law on special consumption tax, SET, which is very superior. With BEVs, special consumption tax is reduced to 1%, 2%, or 3%, depending on the number of seats. To promote the importation of EVs to Vietnam, gradually will increase the SET to 4%, 7%, to 10%, and 11%. But with conventional vehicles, we will keep the previous or the same special consumption tax. So I see strong action and positive action on taxing from the government of Vietnam. We have also provided a favorable policy for registration tax, or Ministry of Finance has already just now addressed incentives, financial incentives for battery producers. These are the policies that will support sustainability of the sector as a whole, instead of bubble of growth. Say if we if stakeholders are exempted, say 20 or given 20% reduction, could you please tell us like a clear or specific number so that we know, compared to a petrol powered vehicles, how much at the moment are consumers given in terms of subsidy, not directly, but maybe indirectly? Ms. Ngọc, well, looking at 20%, it's just a net figure, but in reality, it's probably higher because SET is determined post importation. So 20% is just the minimum, just a net figure, but in reality, the consumers will be entitled to even or higher benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, there are different views on whether we should provide a direct or indirect subsidy to consumers, but we should give them, our people, a specific number. My wife actually is one of the first buyers in Vietnam of EV, and I actually had to build a home-based charging station because my wife complained that when she went to the basement of in-homes, she had to wait for a long time to charge her vehicles, especially with the rise in electric taxis. So, Mr. Tuấn, charging station. There are companies like VinFast that produces EVs and develops charging stations. Other companies are still very hesitant to develop charging stations for their own vehicles. Mr. Tuấn, from the perspective of a researcher, what do you think we can do in order to address this problem, the absence of charging stations? Mr. Associate Professor Lê Tuấn from HUSC. We have to have a comprehensive approach. Like Mr. Lê Anh Tuấn, as I understand, is leading the drafting of a EV development strategy in Vietnam. I believe in that strategy, we will see different scenarios for the development of EVs based on the network of charging stations. I believe this strategy will inform relevant stakeholders greatly, and in its drafting, we will definitely involve relevant stakeholders. With electric motorcycles, it's actually very easy because we can charge our electric motorcycles using the power at home, but with cars, with vehicles, it's not as easy, and I believe developers have thought about it. Aside from public charging stations, it's important to develop a network of home-based charging stations. With home-based charging stations, vehicles can be charged overnight, right? Maybe not in a couple of hours, but maybe overnight. And that will help address the problem faced by Mr. Hong's wife. In order to build these home-based charging stations, the grid has to be strong enough. So that once again has to do with the planning or the power development plan of the grid. But it's a chicken and egg question whether we should invest in the development of charging stations first or whether we should invest in the development of EVs first. While we should not raise this question, in my opinion, it doesn't matter which one comes first, but they can go hand in hand. It doesn't mean that we have to produce a lot of electric vehicles without developing charging stations. We can just do it gradually. Maybe some vehicles, some EVs, and some charging stations, or some charging stations first and some EVs produced. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Lee England from HUSD. Electric vehicles and charging stations definitely should go hand in hand. Tesla, EVs, importers have at the very beginning had to take care of their own charging demand. But imagine if we want to develop home-based charging stations in each and every home. Well, that means that houses in Vietnam have to have garages, right? And that will be very costly to an average consumer. So I would like to address the Technical Infrastructure Agency about the progress of the development of charging stations and policy framework for it. In other countries, it is stipulated very clearly that every parking lot should have at least one charging station. I wonder what is the current progress at the Ministry of Construction. Ladies and gentlemen, from Ministry of Construction, I would like to respond to our moderator's question. To implement Decision 876, Ministry of Construction has released Decision 766, which covers a number of key components. In terms of policies, we have integrated green and electric infrastructures into that decision as a priority. We are drafting 2 laws. The laws on urban development and the law on rural development, and they will be submitted to the National Assembly and the government, and if possible, they will be released early 2025, in which we will encourage green and infrastructures for EVs. Decision 766 also asks relevant agencies to revise National Technical Regulation 01 so that we can consider the ratio of charging station per apartment building. So we are expecting to revise National Technical Regulation 01 very soon. I would like to add one more thing about Decision 766 of MOC. We have asked relevant agencies to revise technical specifications and standards for charging stations, as well as the norm for charging stations. Thank you very much. Mr. Hoang, well, in order to achieve these great ambitions set out in Decision 7876, legal framework development is critical because it will provide legal corridors for implementation, and MOC action is very timely. We hope that by 2024, right, the two laws that you are drafting at MOC will be released. Technical regulations and applications will be released very soon. Of course, we want it to be released even sooner, but that is good enough by 2024, 2025. Well, in Mr. Chung's presentation, he has discussed in great detail, so I would like to come back to him later. But in UNDP's welcome remark, our Deputy Resident Representative shared with us international experiences and focus areas and support towards Vietnam. I would like to address Mr. Dao Xuân Lai, Chief of Environment and Climate Change from UNDP. As a Vietnamese person and also an objective expert in this sector, what are the opportunities for EVs in Vietnam? And do you think the objectives set out in Decision 876 will be feasible or achievable or not, considering all the incentives that have been provided so far? To achieve those targets and objectives, what else should we do? Thank you very much for your question. And on behalf of UNDP, I would like to thank the government of Japan and the government of Vietnam for allowing us to work with you at this very early stage. I met Mr. Hùng last year, and Mr. Hùng, I hold the same view. I think the transition to EVs took place 2 or 3 years ago, and since last year, I think you would agree with me that we have seen major changes. And the 6 obstacles we identified last year, I have seen great progress is made on all of these obstacles, from human resources to environmental protection and charging stations. So I believe that the targets set in Decision 876 are not too much achievable. But the first thing we should do is probably being more aggressive in specifying the exact figures or numbers, because in Vietnam, the problem is we are very hesitant to set a specific figure, say 1,000 or 2,000 cars, right, of EVs, with clear numbers given by the government. Ministries have to work together in order to achieve that number. But in Vietnam, we don't give any absolute numbers. We just say a certain percentage, 20%, 30%. And I think this is an area for improvement. That's my first point. My second point is that UNDP supports policy dialogue like this one. And we also take very concrete actions, other concrete actions. We have had projects in Quy Nhơn and Ho Chi Minh City by working through funds to support households. We also work through associations. For example, we support the partnership between the youth union in Ho Chi Minh City and a company called Select. And we also support the partnerships of different e-commerce platforms. So we have to target very specific populations in order to see great results. Policies are important, but we have to, instead of rolling out really generic solutions, we should target very specific populations. Aside from public transportation, For example, garbage trucks are another area that we can work on. UNDP has worked with consumer good associations to figure out what are the key concerns of consumers. So by working with them, we have found out that consumers are extremely concerned about safety, and many residents of apartment buildings have filed their complaints saying that they don't want charging stations to be installed in the basement or near the apartment complexes. Well, we have to address this concern very soon because while we want to develop EVs or mainstream EVs, people don't support this idea, don't allow EVs to be parked in their basement or charging stations to be built in their basement or near the apartment block. So this is one of the things that we should focus on in the time to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Lai, Sun Lai from UNDP, and Mr. Sun Lai has been following this sector with keen attention. And since last year, I agree with you. Since I talked to you last year, we've seen so many progresses. In Vietnam, we have this saying, smart people always give vague answers. And those who hear that answer will have to determine what they want to hear. And that's the reason why I believe that is also the approach of the government of Vietnam, giving out really ambiguous relative percentages. I agree with you. We should give absolute numbers, like 10% the market, this 1,000 number of cars, right? Instead of people being really indecisive, right? Decisive about whether they should purchase EVs or not, why don't we start working on garbage trucks, public transport, right? Resources are waiting for us. But if we just get stuck at one point, that is electric vehicles purchased by citizens, that it will just be a bottleneck, well, and resources will not be unlocked or unleashed. So I understand where you're coming from. We can target other areas. So one clear number, right? Pure figure or absolute number. To achieve that number, we have to remain very flexible. To conclude our first panel discussion, I would like to give a very brief question to Mr. Hoài Trung. Mr. Hoài Trung, in accordance to decision 876, 100% of the conventional buses will be replaced by e-buses or buses that run on clean energy. In your view, what is the current progress at local level, and do you think that we can achieve this at a percentage of 100% replacement? Thank you for allowing me to speak last, but not thank you for giving me such a difficult, tough question. I totally agree with Mr. Line saying that it's hard for us to give an absolute number. Well, you just given me a question about absolute figures. So TSI has worked with 63 cities and provinces on the progress of implementing decision 876. And our findings are that, as I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of local governments are misunderstanding decision 876. Bắc Giang and Northern Mountainous provinces and Central Highlands provinces do not have enough resources because the cheapest bus that we can find on the market is from China and it costs 7 billion each. Mr. Lai, Ministry of Transport and the government are very determined to achieve this goal of 100% of replacement. Facing these difficulties, I have found many provincial governments remain very flexible by setting an alternative goal, making sure that 100% of newly procured buses are e-buses. Another approach that I've seen many provinces have taken is carbon credit trading. I have found their approaches very innovative, very flexible, very versatile. To tell you a conclusive answer of whether the goal can be achieved or not, I believe that if provincial governments are determined and aggressive, that 100% replacement rate can be achieved. Carbon credit trading, for example, mobilization of external resources can be done. So it takes really great flexibility from the local government. Thank you, Mr. Hoài Chung from TDSI. And let's conclude our session here and spare our time for the following panel discussion, because the following panel discussion has more to do with local government and what they have been doing. With that, I would like to thank you, our leaders, and all the participants for following our first panel discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Quách Việt Hùng, moderator, and our panelists for giving us a really rich discussion and update on the transition to EVs. That brings us to the end of our first panel discussion. Let's take a 10-minute break before we come back and continue with our second panel discussion.
Lao trong 10 phút và sau đó thì xin mời quý vị sẽ cùng quay. Ngày hôm nay xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
now we can continue our national policy dialogue. Once again, please go back to the venue so that we can continue our program. Thank you. Bạn nghe to nhỉ?
Người tiêu dùng. Chỉ khi nào người tiêu dùng hài lòng với sản phẩm, doanh nghiệp có lợi nhuận, lợi ích giữa nhà nước, người dân và doanh nghiệp được hài hòa, thì chúng ta mới có thể có được sự chuyển đổi năng lượng bền vững nhằm giảm ô nhiễm môi trường. Vì vậy, ban tổ chức dành phiên 2 của hội thảo ngày hôm nay với chủ đề thị trường xe điện
will be about electric vehicle market, the perspective from consumers and enterprises. So first, let's watch a video about the current status of electric vehicles in Vietnam.
2023 được coi là một năm đầy sôi động của thị trường ô tô điện tại Việt Nam. Nếu năm 2019 chỉ có 138 xe ô tô điện sản xuất lắp ráp và nhập khẩu được kiểm tra, cấp giấy chứng nhận, thì đến nay có khoảng 22.000 ô tô thuần điện, hơn 11.000 xe hybrid kết hợp sử dụng xăng điện. Cả nước hiện cũng đã có hơn 2 triệu mô tô, xe gắn máy và hơn 7.000 xe đạp điện. BMI Research, một đơn vị nghiên cứu thị trường hàng đầu thế giới, đã đưa ra dự đoán năm 2023, doanh số bán ô tô điện của Việt Nam sẽ tăng 114,8% so với năm ngoái, đạt khoảng 18.000 chiếc. Cụ thể, doanh số bán xe điện chạy bằng pin BEV có thể tăng 104,4% so với năm trước, lên gần 17.000 chiếc. Doanh số xe điện lai xăng PHEV có thể tăng gấp 9 lần so với cùng kỳ năm ngoái, lên gần 1.100 chiếc. Xa hơn, Hiệp hội các nhà sản xuất ô tô Việt Nam cũng dự đoán tổng sở hữu xe điện tại Việt Nam sẽ đạt 1 triệu người vào năm 2028 và lên đến 3,5 triệu người vào năm 2040. Số lượng xe điện gia tăng nhanh chóng cũng đang đặt ra những yêu cầu cấp bách về việc kiểm soát chất lượng của các cơ quan quản lý, cũng như việc nâng cao nhận thức và hiểu biết của người dân để sử dụng loại phương tiện này một cách hiệu quả và an toàn.
Nhà tôi thì cũng có 2 con xe điện rồi. Tôi thấy cái xe điện này cũng an toàn, vệ sinh môi trường.
Việc mà xe điện nó không phát thải hiệu khí, hiệu ứng nhà kính, nó giúp cho người đi đường không bị ô nhiễm, và thậm chí là những cái động cơ nó không tỏa nhiệt, thì trong quá trình dừng đỗ tại các cái đèn xanh đèn đỏ thì nó sẽ không ảnh hưởng đến người xung quanh. Nó trong quá trình vận hành ấy, thì cái xe điện nó mang lại cho gia đình tôi cái là không có khí thải, không ô nhiễm và không mùi trong quá trình sử dụng.
Với những định hướng và xu thế chuyển đổi, trong năm 2023 đã có rất nhiều doanh nghiệp đặc biệt quan tâm đến thị trường xe điện tại Việt Nam. Tại Việt Nam, ngoài VinFast đã sản xuất và bán ra thị trường hàng chục nghìn ô tô điện, cùng với việc đầu tư hạ tầng chạm sạc khắp 63 tỉnh thành, Hyundai Thành Công hay TNT Motor cũng đã lắp ráp và ra mắt các mẫu ô tô điện đầu tiên tại Việt Nam. Một số doanh nghiệp quốc tế nhập khẩu ô tô điện khác như Porsche, Audi, Tesla, BMW, Kia, BYD cũng đã đưa ô tô điện về bán tại Việt Nam. Đến nay cũng đã có nhiều doanh nghiệp đầu tư hạ tầng và kinh doanh thiết chạm sạc ô tô điện. Ngoài các hãng ô tô đã và đang xây dựng chạm sạc tại Việt Nam như VinFast, Porsche hay Mercedes-Benz, còn có một số đơn vị đầu tư phát triển chạm sạc bên thứ ba như EV1, EVEV, EVOS, EVN. Hệ sinh thái xe điện đang dần được hình thành, cùng với mức thu nhập của người dân ngày một nâng lên, đang được coi là những cơ hội tốt để thúc đẩy thị trường xe điện tại Việt Nam tăng tốc trong thời gian tới.
Trung tâm giao thông công cộng cũng đã tham mưu cho Sở báo cáo một số chính sách. Thứ nhất là rà soát, xây dựng, ban hành các bộ định mức đơn giá liên quan đến hoạt động vận tải công cộng cho loại hình nhiên liệu điện, nhiên liệu xanh. Thứ hai là Sở Giao thông cũng đang tham mưu cho Sở Giao thông hiện nay cũng đang lấy ý kiến của các sở ngành về việc ban hành mức hỗ trợ lãi vay và thời gian hỗ trợ liên quan đến các dự án chuyển đổi nhiên liệu điện, nhiên liệu xanh trong hoạt động vận tải công cộng. Đồng thời, chúng tôi cũng đang kiến nghị Ủy ban nhân dân thành phố cho phép sử dụng các phương tiện hiện nay đến hết thời gian khấu hao là 10 năm để đảm bảo không tránh lãng phí.
Có thể thấy, thị trường xe điện ở Việt Nam đang rất sôi động, có sự cạnh tranh giữa các thương hiệu nhập khẩu và trong nước. Đây là cơ hội lớn cho sự phát triển xe điện trong tương lai. Tuy nhiên, theo các chuyên gia trong lĩnh vực này, để thúc đẩy mạnh mẽ việc chuyển đổi sang xe điện, phải cần thêm những nhóm giải pháp đồng bộ, từ chính sách đến quy hoạch phát triển chung, những ưu đãi cụ thể cho doanh nghiệp sản xuất, cung ứng xe điện. Đặc biệt cần có các chính sách phù hợp để khuyến khích người dùng tạo một thói quen tiêu dùng hoàn toàn mới trong tương lai.
The video has shown us the status quo of EV in Vietnam. We have understood about the opportunities and challenges related to electric vehicles from watching this video. And now, to begin the second session of the National Policy Dialogue, I would like to invite Mr. Đào Công Quyết from the Vietnam Automobile Manufacturers Association. Going to deliver a presentation on transition to vehicles using electricity in Vietnam. The first was Mr. Quyết. Deputy Minister of Transport, distinguished guests, leaders from the transport sector, representatives from the Japanese Embassy to Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Vietnam Automobile Manufacturers Association, VAMA, I would like to send appreciation to the organizing committee for inviting us to this workshop today, so that we can have the opportunity to share our opinions on transition to electric vehicles. There are two main contents in my presentation. First, about we are going to talk about our perspective about on the transition of electric vehicles, and secondly, we are going to share with you some of the key points in our proposal. So, transition of electric vehicles require large resources from the state sector and from the public sector and the private sector. The government should introduce new regulations that are favorable to the development of electric vehicles. From the private sector needs to conduct research and invest more in the manufacturing of electric vehicles. These can have positive impacts on the people in Vietnam, which are the user of electric vehicles. So the cost for manufacturing of electric vehicles is very high. That is the reason why the price for electric vehicles is also quite exorbitant. So in 2020, the price of electric vehicles is 40% higher than conventional vehicles. So thanks to the advancement in technology, the price of electric vehicles will hopefully be reduced. So the price of electric vehicles can decide whether the users want to buy, the people want to buy electric vehicles or not. The second impact is that this can also impact the enterprises in terms of investment and scaling up of electric vehicles. So the transition to electric vehicles and green energy vehicles need to be approached in a balanced way and be developed harmoniously to avoid causing market disturbances. We want to contribute our opinions to the Ministry of Transport, and we want to be involved in the development of a plan on electric vehicle transition in Vietnam. To be more specific, we have the following proposals. First, we need to add two more types of EV, hybrid EV and plug-in hybrid EV, HEVs and PHEVs. These are the types of electric vehicles which are subject to supportive incentive policies. The reason why we have to invest into these two types of vehicles are that they are very environmentally friendly and they're suitable to the current context of Vietnam. And they are also suitable to the infrastructure of Vietnam, the road infrastructure of Vietnam, and it can help reduce the emission because the electric vehicles cannot guarantee 0% of emissions. So we need to develop these specific two types. For HEV, according to our research, so it can save up to 40 or 50% of energy. The HEV is an electric vehicle that can still operate even when electricity is not sufficient. So PHEV can save up to 60 or 17% of energy. And secondly, we want to clarify the concept of green energy. What is green energy? What are the different kinds of in green energy? We need to understand that so that we can know more about some specifications and standards of developing green vehicles. And next, in order to facilitate transition to green vehicles, we need to have some incentive policies for import of EVs. We need to have more incentive policies, especially for imported EVs, And this is going to be very necessary for market expansion. And the next points in our proposal is that, according to decision 876 of the Ministry of Transport and the government, the Ministry of Transport is responsible for developing um, an, a national action program on transition to green to electric vehicles. Our association wants to apply the corporate average fuel economy, which we call CAFE. Because if we follow the proposal by the Ministry of Transport, it can be 97% of the current models in the market cannot meet this demand from the Ministry of Transport. So we hope that the Ministry of Transport can adjust your standards. You should follow the corporate average fuel economy approach so that manufacturers can can adjust the number of vehicles sold and can balance between the vehicles that use a lot of energy and vehicles that use less energy so that it will not disturb the production and manufacturing of vehicles. And this is going to be the foundation for us to develop the carbon market. So at the moment, Bama is cooperating with um, an association which is specialized in motorbikes. And so we will submit our proposals and recommendations to the Ministry of Transport in the future. And lastly, we suggest no introduction of policy to restrict ICE vehicles. Instead, we should have incentive policies to encourage the use of vehicles using electricity and green energy so that you can have so this approach will be more balanced and gradually shape the behavior of the users and help increase their awareness of the necessity of electricity and green energy. For road transport, we suggest removing a regulation on the emission fee for road motor vehicles. We fully support the transition to green vehicles, and we look forward to be involved in the formulation of regulations and policies on the transition to green and energy electricity vehicles. So we really want our proposal and the recommendation to be heard and collected by different ministries and departments involved in this project. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Đào Công Quyết from the Communication Department under VAMA. At the moment, many governments in the world has introduced a roadmap to transition to greener electric vehicles. This is an international trend and also an international experience that can be distributed to Vietnam. And in order to share the international experience, Associate Professor Wilma Martinez of KU Leuven, Belgium, will deliver a presentation. However, Mr. Wilma Martinez is in Belgium at the moment, so he's going to deliver his presentation online. The technical team, please connect to Mr. Wilma Martinez.
Ladies and gentlemen, please wait for a few minutes as we're trying to connect with Professor Wilma Martinez.
Good morning, do you hear me?
Could you please repeat? Thank you.
Okay, I think you're hearing me. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me Yes, as was introduced already, I am Wilmar Martinez. I am an associate professor in the University of Leuven here in Belgium, quite early in the morning, so sorry for my voice. And within the project in cooperation with UNDP, named Scaling Up of E-Mobility and Mechanisms for Promoting Investments in Green Projects in Vietnam, we have the part of International Review of Good Practices of Charging Infrastructure, which will be given today by me. So in this project, together with specialists and experts also locally in Vietnam, we have been working towards recommending good practices in the part of increasing charging infrastructure in Vietnam. Today I will be basically mentioning this international review where we selected three countries to compare with Vietnam, some definitions, and at the end, lessons learned, and more importantly, recommendations for Vietnam. So in this review, we have selected basically these three countries very well known, of course, Thailand, because it's in the vicinity of Vietnam. Also quite interesting because Thailand has adopted already Tesla, also along with Indonesia and Singapore in Southeast Asia. So the experience of Thailand in adopting Tesla is quite important and beneficial for Vietnam. Also South Korea, as it is a quite good experience, quite advanced in the terms of charging infrastructure today. When we see, for instance, the ratio of a number of chargers per vehicles or per population, South Korea is actually the best in the world. And also the case of Germany. Germany, because Germany has more or less the same population as Vietnam, and Germany is perhaps the largest automotive manufacturer in Europe, and is also quite a good country to compare with, at least in this international review. We have done this international review taking into account several criteria, like for instance, charging infrastructure deployment, standardization, charging location, charging powers, meaning the speed or what the vehicles will be charged, and also differentiating between public and private charging, as it was mentioned in the forum this morning. It's not the same charging overnight at home than charging fast in a highway or in a national way. Also, when we are going to have millions and millions of cars, it's important to take into account the access to electricity, and their smart charging is also important, and of course incentives and policies. All of this is actually already framed in a full report, so I will only mention few takeaway messages in this presentation. For more information, we can consult UNDP to see the whole report. So first, for a few definitions. Of course, you are quite aware of these different types of charging. We distinguish mainly 3 or 4 types of electric vehicle charging. The first one is the so-called slow charging. I think I'm getting some feedback because of the translation. I will continue. The first one is the use of onboard chargers for slow charging. So we use hardware installed in the vehicle. And the other one is, of course, onboard chargers, which are installed along highways, in cities, and many other places. And more we see also in the future topics like wireless charging, and especially in Vietnam, also the possibility to have battery swapping, especially when we don't have many vehicles. When we have millions of vehicles, battery swapping becomes more complex because we need, of course, a wide charging infrastructure in the country. Of course, if we look inside the vehicle, this is quite important because depending on what the access that we have to electricity, either if it's single phase or 3-phase, we will be having a different onboard charger, and also, of course, a different type of DC fast charging to the battery. But this is just technicalities, just to have in mind what type of infrastructure we need to charge these vehicles. We did also this evaluation taking into account different charging connectors. Like for instance, we know already that VinFast in South Korea is using already the CCS type connector. Oh, sorry. But of course, in the USA, they are also using the NACS type, or used also by Tesla, and they are also these SAE connectors. Japan has their own charging connector, and also China with this GVT. So one important message is to select already a charging connector, to have that standardization already in the country, because at the point where, for instance, Tesla is going to get offices in Vietnam, is important also to tell what type of connectors they should follow. I am mentioning this because if we see around the world, for instance, these are the type of connectors that Tesla is using at the moment. We see a big difference, like, for instance, in North America, Mexico, the US, and Canada. Also the same in Japan and South Korea. They have adopted the Tesla connector, the small one, which is basically following the NACS connector. It's not a standard yet, but it's a type of connector which benefits basically single phase connections. If we have three-phase connections, the CCS connector is actually quite better, and therefore we can see, for instance, here the whole Europe, part of Africa, Australia, and also Thailand. That's why Thailand was also selected in this review, that they have adopted the CCS standard. And of course, the Chinese standard, quite important, adopted by China and followed by certain countries. So we did this review, differentiating different types of features. We have Thailand, South Korea, and Germany. And for instance, we can see here the planning and some incentives. Like for instance, today in the forum, were several key points about Thailand were mentioned already. They have already different incentives, not extremely aggressive, but they have implemented many. Like for instance, this 6-8 year tax exemptions to users, which are quite good, and they have because of that, the number of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure in Thailand have been increased in the recent years. South Korea is a quite special country in the world. They have done a quite intensive and aggressive support towards companies and also users. You may know that, for instance, Hyundai and Kia, they have received massive support from the government to develop their electric vehicles, and also the TSOs, the electricity companies, they also have received massive incentives towards the development of charging infrastructure, but also the users. The users, they have received quite many incentives, especially in taxes and reduction of costs of electric vehicles. Germany is also quite a specific case, and I have a specific slide just dedicated to Germany, so I will come back to this point in a minute. Charging connectors, as I was mentioning, this is quite important. Thailand has adopted the CCS. Also, they have used CHAdeMO to some extent, but CCS is taking more popularity around the world. South Korea, they have also CCS and the NACS from Tesla. This is a Tesla connector, so they have both. And in Germany, similar as in Thailand, also in Europe, we have adopted the CCS. And in the past, we had also CHAdeMO, but CCS is the more popular today. So this is one of the recommendations for Vietnam. You need to decide whether you stick with CCS or whether you allow also GVT from China, or you use a type of adapter. And when Tesla arrives, if you will allow the NNCA's connector, or if you will make a Tesla to use a CCS. Therefore, we will in Vietnam you will use only one single connector for all vehicles, which is advisable or not. That's of course depending on the policies. One of the points of comparison in this international review was the number of Tesla supercharging points in each country. You can see, for instance, Thailand. Thailand is increasing the number of superchargers. They have only 9 until the day that this review was made. South Korea is quite ahead with more than 100 charging points. This is supercharging points, so take in mind that. Chargers of 50 to 150 and higher kilowatts range. And Germany, in Germany we have closer to 200 charging points and many more in already planned. And the total number of charging stations or points information is quite scattered, so to say. So it's as we have, of course, a fast transition, but till the point of this review, we have seen that in Thailand, they have a range of thousands of stations, while in South Korea, they have hundreds of thousands of points of connections. I already mentioned that South Korea is number one around the world in terms of the ratio of charging points per 100 kilometers and also charging points per number of electric vehicles. And that's also quite important when we are going to develop charging infrastructure to have in mind that ratio. A good ratio is to have, for instance, one charger or one charging point for every 10 electric vehicles. Of course, the lower the better, but that at least it's a good ratio. And in Germany, closer to 100,000 stations. A good number to compare also among countries is the chargers per 100 kilometers. This information is being collected at the moment, so cannot be reported right now. But it's also important to take that into account. Vietnam is a quite long country, so it will be quite important to specify that, and that's also one of the recommendations that we are building in the group of UNDP. If every fast charger should be located every 50 or every 60 or every 70 kilometers along the highway. Estimated number of electric vehicles here. By electric vehicles, I am taking into account battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So batteries with a plug, electric vehicles with a plug. And here we can see a big difference. Like Thailand, they already have more than 100,000 vehicles. South Korea with more than 400,000 by 2022. So at this moment, I expect that they have more than 500,000 vehicles in 2023, and Germany with more than 2.6 million. Just for the comparison, as it was shown in the video, Vietnam has at this moment around 20,000 electric vehicles, basically because of the introduction of the VinFast taxis in the country. Technology is quite scattered as well in terms of charging infrastructure. We have a quite large variety of interconnections with the power grid to power either DC or AC chargers. Also in the video, we saw several companies offering these wallbox or these chargers in the world. That can be used to charge our vehicles at home. So that's also being taken into account in this international review. Market models, they differ quite a lot. Like for instance, Tesla is offering free charging when opening a market. Like for instance, if you in Vietnam you get a Tesla, that will happen. They will start installing their Tesla superchargers, and they will be for free. I mean, charging the kilowatt hour will be for free for many months in order to encourage users to charge in their chargers. That's also a recommendation. We know that in Vietnam we have quite plenty of VinFast chargers. I think at some point those chargers should be open to all brands and to the public in general, and that will be also quite important to encourage AV adoption. In South Korea, as I was mentioning, the Tesla same model was implemented there, and plenty of governmental incentives were implemented to charging. In Germany, there has been quite a big transition or quite many business models or market models, basically with private companies that they install chargers. Let's say every company can install chargers in their parking lots, and those chargers can be open to the public, and they follow their own model, so to say. So they have a fixed price for kilowatt hour. While, for instance, charging in a city, charging in public places, these companies, they follow strictly the electricity prices. Electricity prices, they change a lot, at least here in Europe, because of the gas prices and the introduction of new renewable energies. So they should follow also those. But at least the private ones, they have a more conservative model, which allows them to operate. We have also identified plenty of stakeholders, like, of course, the government, transmission system operators, distribution system operators, grid, private energy companies, of course, the OEMs, local partners like gas stations, supermarkets, department stores, hotels. Those are quite important, because when we are going to install more fast chargers, it should be always in partnership with this type of local companies. And of course, quite important, the user. So in a nutshell, I mentioned also the good practices of the example of Germany, which I think could be quite important for Vietnam as well. Investments to R&D, one of the main recommendation to Vietnam is not only to focus on companies, but also to focus on R&D institutions. So, for instance, to empower NAFOSTED in Vietnam to create this type of projects where innovation can be empowered. Like, for instance, in Europe and also in Germany, several hundreds of billions of euros, and also tens of billions with the Horizon Europe program, formerly known as Horizon 2020. These investments really encourage universities and companies to work together towards innovation in this field. Germany has also encouraged the purchase of new electric vehicles with incentives up to 80% of the delta with the prices of conventional gasoline and diesel vehicles. And for instance, in the forum was mentioned already that electric vehicles are more expensive, 40% more expensive than gasoline vehicles. So this type of incentives really can help reduce that delta. Reductions in tolls, like for instance in Germany, and there are tolls for trucks, and in France there are tolls for passenger vehicles. Those tolls were reduced to €0 per kilometer until 2023 for electric vehicles, and will be reduced up to for 2040 with some small fees. Several processes to deploy infrastructure in the trans-European network. So the idea is that those European network highways, by 2030, that they will have a full deployed charging infrastructure. And the final good practice, I think, is also quite important for Vietnam, along encouraging electric vehicles with benefits. It's also important to discourage the use of gasoline and diesel vehicles by increasing, for instance, CO2 taxes or CO2 prices to diesel and gasoline, basically making diesel and gasoline more expensive so that people can go and transition towards electric vehicles. Electric vehicles and gasoline and diesel vehicles is not only about the cost of buying the vehicle, but it's also about the total cost of ownership. So if we buy today For instance, a gasoline vehicle, you will have to pay, of course, for the gasoline every week or every month. And that part, I think, is not being considered yet, the total cost of ownership. So to finalize my presentation, the lessons learned is, of course, to have in mind the connectors, the location of superchargers, power per charger, governmental support like tax incentives till certain coverage, special finance policies, and of course to take into account the number of chargers per 100 kilometers. Recommendations for Vietnam, quite specifically, choose a known connector. My advice is to go for the CCS only, and to make adapters for instance, the Chinese vehicles or the Tesla vehicles, but stick to the CCS as BIMFAS is doing at this moment. A strong governmental support that's really important to local and foreign EV companies. In Vietnam, you have a quite privileged position. You have a local electric vehicle manufacturer, which is not the same in many countries. That's quite powerful. System integrators, and by system integrators, I mean companies that can produce chargers and can install it in Vietnam, and of course the users. Prioritize routes with high traffic. We have seen already that there are several highways and national roads that have a quite high traffic in Vietnam. Those are the ones to be prioritized first. Discourage the use of gasoline and diesel vehicles. Increase, for instance, the taxes to diesel and gasoline. And of course, be aggressive. That's really important at this stage in order to take a speed really in this adoption of electric vehicles. Faster electrification. You in Vietnam, you have also quite privileged position, and the kilowatt hour is not expensive as in many other countries. So that's also a quite powerful message when we are going to use electric vehicles. One point is, of course, to invest more in transmission lines. We have seen that, for instance, quite a lot of energy is generated in the south of the country, and the transmission towards the north is not as strong. So that's another advice or recommendation, really, to make that interconnection between the south and the north more stronger. And of course, use of existing gas stations. They are already quite popular along Vietnam, every 50, 40 kilometers. So use those gasoline stations already to start the increase of fast chargers and normal chargers. This is my last message, and with this one I will just finish my presentation. If you see, for instance, the VAMA projections and the TDSI, we see, for instance, that we will expect 1 million electric vehicles by 2028, or more or less 3.5 million electric vehicles by 2040. And of course, the intention of the government is to have zero emissions by 2050. And if we see the projections of cars, that means that we will need to have more or less 8 million electric vehicles by 2050. So if we locate the numbers today, like 20,000 electric vehicles, and we have more or less 6 million passenger cars, and in 2050 we will require 8 million vehicles. So it's important to take action now to see if we are going to do a linear growth, or more or less like this exponential, or this type of growth, or if it's better to grow slow first and then extremely fast in order to cope with those numbers. So with that, I would like to finalize my presentation, just saying that you have a good potential in Vietnam. It's quite nice that you are discussing already this. You have already thousands of vehicles there. So it's just to encourage and to be more aggressive in the policy making in order to meet those numbers by 2050. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thanks so much, Professor Wilmar Martinez, for your discussion. I look forward to meet you in the following seminars.
Yeah, looking forward as well.
Kính thưa quý vị, như vậy là trong những thời gian đầu tiên của phiên thứ hai hội thảo, chúng ta đã cùng lắng nghe phần thảo luận, tham luận về chuyển đổi sang
on on transition to electric cars from Mr. Đào Công Tuyết from Burma, as well as a presentation on about Associate Professor Wilma Martinez from Belgium on international experiences of using green electric vehicles. And now we are going to move on to the next panel discussion number 2, with the topic electric vehicle EV market perspective of consumers and businesses. Attending the panelists for our discussion is Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, includes Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, Executive Vice Chairman of National Traffic Safety Committee, and he's going to be the moderator of the panel discussion. Other panelists in this discussion include Mr. Bùi Hà Năng, Hồ Chí Minh, Department of Transport, Mr. Đào Công Tuyết from Burma, Mr. Phan Lê Hoàng Linh from the Ministry of Industry and Trade, Mr. Đỗ Phan Anh, Deputy Head of the Transportation Department under Hà Nội Department of Transport. Please come to the stage. Please give our panelists a round of applause. Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, the moderator, and other panelists are ready. We are like, there's one person left, right? Okay, we have Mr. Thành, Mr. An, Mr. Tuyết. Department of Transport, we need a panelist from the Department of Transport. He's left. He's already left. I have a very interesting question for the Hanoi Department of Transport, which he's not here today. Can someone call him? Oh, that's okay. I'm afraid I cannot sit in 2 chairs. So, okay, please move closer. Let's come back to the topic of incentive policies for the use of electric vehicles. Rama has mentioned one recommendation for policy making, a very big recommendation. I know that Rama it's not the, so I have the question to address Rama. Besides the very macro recommendations that Rama has given us. So, what do you think, Rama? Should we provide subsidy costs directly to the consumers, or should we maintain the current mechanism? We reduce the tax, the fees, and we also give we have incentive policies in terms of parking places. Mr. Martinez from KU Leuven University also mentioned some international experience from Germany as well. So what do you think, Mr. Khuất? Mr. Khuất Việt Hùng, ladies and gentlemen, Dana does mention very big recommendations for policy making. So about your question, should we provide subsidy costs for consumers, the users? This is actually a very big question as well, because it's related to the financial resource, the budget. What are the impacts of this policy to the users? Are the impacts going to be positive? So for us, we want to encourage users. So it means that we want to use some policies to encourage users. And however, it's up to the government to decide which policy to follow. No, my question is actually very clear. What do you think? What is your opinion on this matter? If Mr. Grip thinks that this question is too big, I just asked you from a personal perspective, what do you think as a consumer? Do you think that these incentive policies are good? Imagine you are a user. So from my personal perspective, if I buy an electric vehicle, yes, I want to protect the environment. So I want to buy an electric vehicle. But however, the EV is much more expensive than conventional vehicles. So I need the incentive policies from the government to reduce the price of EV. So I think that it can encourage users to switch to EV more. Okay, so how about can we have one more chair for another panelist, a deputy head of Hanoi Department of Transport? I have one chair. He just left and now he's come back. Mr. Faman, right? Now we continue. Mr. Clip mentioned a lot of recommendations and proposals from Gama. For example, adding hybrid EV and plug-in hybrid EV to the list of EVs subject to incentive policies, and do not limit the use of ICE. We should only prioritize EV, but we don't ban ICE. So what do you think? The representative of Ministry of Industry and Trade, what do you think about the recommendations given by Gama? Delegates, distinguished guests, I would like to go into detail about the reasons why we have the breakfast recommendations. So the Ministry of Industry and Trade is developing a strategy on the development of automobile industry. So our strategy has to be incorporate a lot of factors. First, localized the brands of different automobile companies. There are three very big international automobile markets in the world. They all want to switch to EV. And at recent times, China is also having a strategy which aims toward EV and smart vehicles. And they think that EV run on battery is beneficial. Can help accelerate the transition to smart vehicles. So EV run on batteries receives the attention from many governments around the world. However, some automobile brands, they have a more careful approach. If we rapidly switch to electric vehicles, despite the inadequate infrastructure and insufficient amount of materials to make batteries for EV, so it will be not good. It cannot accommodate the demand for transition to electric vehicles. So if we focus too much on EV run on battery, so it can create a bubble which is easy to burst. So they have taken a more gradual approach. So the transition to EV should be carried out gradually, not rapidly. We need to take a step-by-step approach, and EV run on battery only is not the only solution for transition to green energy. there are other vehicles as well that use environmentally friendly energy, like we have vehicles run on hydro and even ammonia. Ammonia does not release carbon dioxide, so each automobile brand has their own opinion. So in Vietnam, there are a lot of automobile brands, vehicle brands, and each of them has their own perspective and approach for transition to vehicles, to more environmentally friendly vehicles. Secondly, we need to take into consideration the suitability to users, potential users. We need to bear in mind the price of vehicles. If we have a list of a more diverse list of environmentally friendly vehicles, it will be better for the users. For example, there are some vehicles they charge the price is too high uh, for the income of most users in Vietnam. So maybe users want to switch to a more affordable vehicle, and some users they don't have enough condition to use charging station, so they may switch to hybrid vehicles. And thirdly, and in order for the transition to electric vehicle to suit the development of the infrastructure in Vietnam, I have listened to Mr. Chung's presentation, and there's very interesting information. The charging stations are being developed in Vietnam. However, it is difficult to distribute enough charging stations in Vietnam in such a short time. So it would be better if we can offer a wide variety of options for the consumers so that they can be more familiar with the presence of environmentally friendly vehicles. And lastly, whatever we do, we need to commit to COP26 in strategy development and policy making, and then making of incentive policies for manufacturers and users. Car manufacturers work with us a lot in Ministry of Industry and Trade and Ministry of Finance, and they suggest that the current incentive policies for tax and registration fee are only for vehicles that run on battery only. So manufacturers, they recommend that we should expand the beneficiaries of the incentive policies, and we should calculate, we should take the emission of CO2 as the criteria to identify which vehicle to receive the incentive policies. So we are collecting these opinions and trying to incorporate their point of view into the policies that we are making. So thank you so much, the representative from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. So the suggestion from VAMA and has been received and received by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. And I think that we can reach an agreement to a certain extent. So may I ask Professor Wilma Martinez, can we connect to Professor? How do you evaluate the proposals of VAMA? And are there any conflicts, or are they in line with your recommendations? For Vietnam, can we ask in English? We cannot contact Mr. Wilma, right? So maybe I will request, if possible, the organizers, can you please contact Wilmar? If we cannot ask him now, we can send him this question later. Let's come back to the state management agencies of Vietnam. So I know that the standard number 9 is being amended to incorporate electric vehicles and charging stations. So Vietnam Register Department, from Vietnam Register Department, Mr. Thành, do you have any do you have anything to consult the Ministry of Transport? Thank you so much, Mr. Hùng, for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, at the previous session, Mr. Hùng said that you are really care about figures. You really care about figures, so here are some figures for you. So from 2018 to 2023, so we imported 67,000 EVs, and we have assembled and manufactured 1,700,000 vehicles, and 20 vehicles only, and 22,000 electricity vehicles and cars, and 1,500,000 electric motorbikes. So you can see that over the past few years, we have seen a very significant increase in terms of the number of electric vehicles. So in the last workshop, we have shared this data in a previous workshop, but until now, the figures have been very different. And I hope that in the next year, this figure will continue to increase. So for Mr. Hung's question, in order to address Mr. Hung's question, I would like to say that the technology used for developing electric vehicles is becoming more modern. So countries around the world, they have to be up to date to update a lot of to update to for their policy making. So Vietnam is not an exception. Vietnam also wants to adjust Decree number 9 on electric vehicles in general, and Vietnam to implement resolution number 2 of the National Assembly. So the government has assigned the Ministry of Transport to complete a procedure on electric vehicles. In 24th of September, Vietnam has officially become a member of Treaty Convention 1958. So we are the 67th member. Other countries, they do not participate in this convention. However, they also follow the UN recommendation, UNHCR's recommendations. So the amendment of national standard number 9 is very necessary. The Ministry of Transport is collecting the comments and opinions from different stakeholders regarding the amendment of this standard. And next year, we will submit the results for approval. So some basic information I want to share with you. So in the national standard number 9, we will incorporate a lot of regulations, relevant regulations, to facilitate transition to electric vehicles, including hybrid vehicles or vehicles that use hydro or ammonia. So in terms of the production of batteries, we are a member of a convention in 1958. So we will follow the regulations set out by UN ASEAN to VNEC to make sure that we not only we can import, but we can also export our products. And we want this process to be conducted rapidly. And we will comply with the regulations of UN. And for electric two-wheelers, we will also follow ER 136 standard. So some figures for you. Thank you so much. The representative from the registration department in Vietnam. So I hope that standard, national standard number 9 can be updated, and many other technical specifications should be updated as well, following decree, following convention in 1958 that we have been a member recently. We can learn a lot from convention 1958, so that we can successfully facilitate the integration of Vietnam into the international market. So, and in order for Vietnamese standards to be in line with international standard as well. So let's come back to Associate Professor Martinez. Are you here with us? My question is, do you have what do you think about Vama's proposals and recommendations?
Which specific recommendations, if I may ask?
Anh đang hỏi chi tiết là khuyến nghị nào ạ? Đề xuất nào ạ?
Hiện tại So you did not follow Mr. Fitz's presentation from Vama?
I think I didn't follow that one, so.
All right, it's really unfortunate that you did not follow.
Yeah, but nevertheless, what I have seen, I can comment on the projections of Bama in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, and yeah, I can tell.
So let's come back to the discussion that we are having at this moment at the venue. I would like to ask a business. You are here. You are one of the participants. I want to ask you, the first electric vehicles imported to Vietnam, and the owners have to take care of the charging issues. And then VinFast started to produce both electric vehicles and charging station as well. However, many families using electric vehicles cannot have the enough time to commute to travel to charging stations in order to charge our vehicles. So Mr. Nguyễn Mạnh Cường from maintenance and from a corporation on maintenance of electric vehicles and batteries. So what are the difficulties that you are having at the moment to develop the network of charging stations? And what do you think about the mechanism, the current mechanism, for example, power source credit and national technical specification and standards, and charging station, the location, charging stations, etc. Mr. Cường, the organizers, please give the mic to Mr. Nguyễn Mạnh Cường, President of Distribution and Maintenance of Charging Batteries at Charging Station Vietnam. Thank you so much, Mr. Hùng and Mr. Mike, for your efforts. You have organized a lot of workshops and introduced a lot of recommendations for the transition to electric vehicles. Our company is EV, Ever EV. We are the first companies in Vietnam to invest in electric vehicles besides VinFast. VinFast is a big player in Vietnam. And my company is developing quick charging station. And we are going to develop 240 kilowatt charging station. So we have learned from international experts. I just been to Korea. I just attended a workshop in Korea about batteries and charging. So what you are discussing at the moment are very critical to Vietnam. So as a member from the private sector, I would like to introduce some challenges here. First is the provision of electricity. Without EVN, EVN is not here at the venue, so it is very difficult for us to discuss the shortage of electricity. And in China, they provide 200 kilowatt of electricity to facilitate the use of electric vehicles. But we don't have that in Vietnam, so it's very difficult for us to install quick a rapid charging station. Vietnamese people, they like things to be fast. So that is the reason why the VinFast has its name. So so many countries in the world cannot do things like us. Korea, even Korea cannot catch up to Vietnam in terms of quick charging, quick charging station. So Korea has a lot of charging stations, but the speed cannot catch up with Vietnam. So I hope the EVN can create favorable conditions for the Vietnamese businesses. Secondly, we do not expect to receive more support, but we hope that you do not have any kind of prohibited regulations for us, because according to regulation, there are a lot of restrictions, and some problems about infrastructure as well that we need EVN to address. And next, we are a CPO enterprise. We charge fees for the charging station just like VinFast. So for Vietnamese law, we are not allowed to sell electricity. So it's very difficult to ask for a license to sell electricity. So if other companies they sell the electricity with a very high fees, it will violate the law. So my company cannot do that, and it's going to be a very complicated procedure. So EVN, here are my suggestions to EVN. So the charging station supplier and the consumer, you should work together. The car manufacturer, you should work together. You should cooperate. So in terms of when you manufacture your products, you should work with the providers of charging station to make sure that the products of both sides are compatible. Because there are cases when the charging batteries cannot match with the vehicles manufactured by a certain company. So we have to follow a common technical specification and standard. So TCVN, the Vietnam Technical Standard, 13078. So that is the technical standard that we should follow. So even for VinFast, and there are many other corporations like Hyundai and VinFast should work with these companies to make sure that the products, all the products should follow the same technical standards or specifications. Because if we introduce some charging devices, but it cannot support any vehicles, so it will be a waste. Many big corporations are working with us. They have very clear opinion. They want to introduce a product that can provide battery for any kind of electric vehicles. So that is the next challenge is about credit, financial matters. We don't expect much from the government. Let's make it clear. And the banks are having difficulties in mobilizing the financial resources to invest in electric vehicles. So investors, fund donors, I think it's best to mobilize international resources, because we do not have a large budget to use our own budget. So we have a fund of hundreds of $1 million, and we are working with many big corporations in Vietnam to create a fund, investment fund. And next time we want to work with the Department of Tourism, the National Department of Tourism, to invest in big resorts. We will install the charging station near the big resorts in Vietnam, resort and hotels in Vietnam. So we make sure that, because people always say that if we do not have charging stations available, they will not buy electric vehicles, even though the price can be very cheap. So some there's some opinions from my perspective. Thank you so much for letting me, for giving me the opportunity to say something here. So it's unfortunate that we do not have a representative from EVN here. Let's come back to the question. Mr. Kung has mentioned a lot of valuable inputs, and yeah, we have the vehicles. We have the technical standards and specifications for developing these vehicles and batteries. We have the technical standard number 9, which specifying which give us a common standard to follow. So language is not a problem because we have AI. We can learn from international experience. So how about the localities? The electric vehicles, they run on Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City or Lạng or Thừa Thiên Huế. They are not the only, the Ministry of Transport cannot make decision alone because I have just given some compliments from Hanoi Department of Transport. I will going to give you a reason later, but now I would like to ask Ho Chi Minh Department of Transport, what are your plans and orientations to the implement decision S76? Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with your opinions, most of the opinions. And in order to implement decision S76, besides the plan, the programs that we have developed so far, Ho Chi Minh City is going to do some other activities. From 2010 to the end of 2022, we have managed 12,500 electric vehicles. Most of them are two-wheelers. From January 2023 to June 2023, this number has increased by 2,000 vehicles, 600 four-wheelers from SM Taxi, and electric vehicles used by the people, by citizens as well. And we have introduced 77 electric buses operating in 5 routes. At 128 routes in Ho Chi Minh City, we have also 500 other CNG buses. However, CNG provision is insufficient, so we are trying to convert to another friendlier, more friendly energy. So besides decision 876, the National Assembly has approved the resolution number 98. The Article 6 Clause 13 allows the provincial Ho Chi Minh People's Committee to provide incentive policies for enterprises and people to facilitate the transition of conventional vehicles to vehicles that use more environmentally friendly energy. So Ho Chi Minh City is assigned by the People's Committee to formulate a detailed plan on the implementation of this resolution. So, however, the progress is quite slow. So we are conducting more research, and maybe at the beginning, in the beginning of 2024, then we have the results. So consultancy firms, we will distribute some questionnaires at the end of November. And now we have distributed more than 10,000 questionnaires. And these questionnaires asked respondents about their demand for electric vehicles, but 86% of them say that they do not have the demand for electric vehicles. Why? They do not show any interest. They use their vehicle, their available vehicles. They are familiar with it. The second reason is that they're very high price. Thirdly, technology is not quality. And lastly, the last reason is that the charging station has not been located in a lot of positions to make it more convenient for users. So in 13.7% of users said that they want to buy electric vehicles in the future. So 12.93 want to buy electric bikes, and over 1% want to buy electric motorbikes, and the rest want to buy electric cars. So the number of people who wants to buy electric motorbikes is very high. So this can help us plan our make policy in a more suitable way to the demand, to suit the demand of the users. And we need to think about the budget that we want to allocate to the development of certain vehicles. And in our next strategy, we are going to localize. We will carry out certain projects of not using diesel energy vehicles to some localities. And Ho Chi Minh City really hopes that this can be carried out effectively and rapidly. And air pollution can also have a negative impact on the people of Ho Chi Minh City. So we also should take into consideration this matter. Thank you so much, the Deputy Head of the Ho Chi Minh the Department of Transport. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that it is suitable to the people of Vietnam. So we need to make sure that people can get access to electric vehicles, can enjoy the fresher atmosphere and better quality air. So policies are very important. However, implementation is also very important. And Ho Chi Minh City is a role model for this, and they have taken very specific actions. And in the beginning of 2024, we may have better mechanisms and regulations at the local level. So let's come back to Hanoi. In Mr. Spanang's presentation, I was very impressed. Subsidy cost, for example. Subsidy cost is beneficial for enterprises interested in electric vehicles like electric buses. So Hanoi has learned from Hanoi has provided us with a very good lesson in practice of developing electric bus. I have one more question for Mr. Phanang. Besides electric buses, does Hanoi have other orientations or policies for infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, a charging station network, create conditions for people to use their personal electric vehicles? So, Mr. Phanang, can you answer this question? Ladies and gentlemen, for Hanoi, according to our regulations, we consider public transport the key priority. This is going to be the pioneering sector. We have 9 routes of electric buses. People love it, and they appreciate the convenience of electric buses. So Hanoi is prioritized public transport. So public transport is a pioneering aspect sector here, and we will also invest in electric taxis. So to implement decision SM6, we have done a lot of activities. 2 years ago, we did not understand much about this decision. However, thanks to in order for us to have a national policy dialogue like this, we have to put into a lot of effort. The electric buses, we have to communicate this strategy to many different companies in Hanoi because they have to invest, they have to pay money. So we have to balance the economic benefits between the public sector and the private sector. And the Hanoi Department of Transport, besides CNG, we also introduce LNG bus. We realize that in order to facilitate the transition to electric vehicle, we also should invest in the infrastructure for these electric vehicles. So LNG, transporting LNG from Hải Phòng port to Hanoi is easy. And LNG is better than CNG in terms of many aspects. So we need some time to gradually switch from CNG to LNG, and then we will invest, start to develop the charging station. Follow that. So the Department of Industry and Trade should also be responsible. The Ministry of Transport cannot do this alone. We have cooperated Department of Industry and Trade. They said that they can give us a sufficient amount of energy to operate 1,000 electric buses. So that is the story of infrastructure. However, we have to comply with the law on investment. There are a lot of regulations that we have to comply. That this is a very complicated procedure. So it is very difficult for us to identify the people that hold accountability. For VinFast, they have their own infrastructure, and we to operate one charging station, they have to spend a lot of money, and it cannot be done overnight. So the Department of Industry and Trade has provide a list of parking places in Hanoi. However, they're very difficult to make sure the sufficient amount of electricity to operate these vehicles. So that is the reason why we want to invest in public transport first, to help the people of Hanoi be familiar with this new type of transportation before we get into the personal vehicles. Thank you so much, Mr. Representative from the Department of Transport in Hanoi. So public transport is going to take the lead, and then we'll invest in the personal vehicles later. However, besides public transport, we have very great demand for personal vehicles as well. So personal vehicles should be the priority, but maybe in the future. So we hope that Hanoi will soon have a strategy for supporting electric public vehicles as well as personal vehicles, and we should do both. Before I finish the panel discussion, I know that there's a representative from a French electric city corporation. So I would like to ask you, what actions have you taken to promote the transition to electric vehicles in France? So Ms. Please give her the microphone. I want to ask about French international experience. I was very impressed with the topic today. I'm very interested in the topic that we are discussing today. So to answer your question, I would like to say that we are from a French electricity corporation. We have our own subsidiary funded by Dynamic, when we focus on wind hydrogen. And our first priority is for mobility and the industrial sector. And the corporation has developed a network of electric vehicles, and this network is incorporated into the electricity network. So the network of electricity and network of electric vehicles are linked together. It supplements each other. You can use electricity, free hydrogen, and free hydrogen. And next, we invest in infrastructure as well, and we also invest in the distribution of electricity. So these factors complement each other. For example, EDF focuses on G2G, vehicle to V2G, vehicle to grid. So electric vehicles is just one pilot, one pillar. So EDF wants to consider electric vehicle as a battery to operate the electricity grid network. So I think that the demand in Vietnam is also very high because renewable energy is going to be used more to generate electricity in Vietnam. So the demand for battery is big. However, the price is expensive. So if we take electric vehicle, we see it as a kind of battery. It will benefit the electricity network. We do not only use electricity, we also support the development of electricity network. Thank you so much. So Mr. Sun, okay, you mentioned my name, so I would like to have a few words as well. So Mr. Cường mentioned some difficulties and challenges in developing charging stations. License for selling electricity is not regulated by DVF, it's regulated by EVN. So in order to improve this procedure, licensing procedure, I understand the Ministry of Industry and Trade is amending the law on electricity. So maybe this issue should be taken into the law, should be taken into this law. And next, the price of electricity, in terms of price of electricity, yesterday, the Ministry of Industry and Trade has issued a new price of electricity. And we have our own price for electricity price for charging stations. So the EVN cannot decide on the electricity price. Just like Mr. Dung said, the government is the one who can decide on the price of electricity. So you must understand this procedure. I also agree with Mr. Cường that it is difficult to
that manufacturers don't speak to each other in terms of their charging technology is a huge issue. At the moment, VinFast only built charging stations for VinFast cars, and it is their business decision and it's their business advantage. If we want to influence their decision, we will have to release a law and regulation at a central level to influence all businesses, including Fast. We can't make one company follow one standard or another without having a universal policy in place. Today, we're talking about accelerating the transition to EVs, but I think we're discussing to clarify how to implement Decision 876 even more. Aside from EVs, we also have other vehicles that are running on green energy. And as mentioned by Bama, it is so important to define what is considered green energy. So aside from incentives for EVs, we need to think more about incentives for other vehicles that run on green energy, such as CNG, or LNG. MIT is developing a national strategy for the promotion of hydrogen. In China, it has been very successfully used to power private and public transport. I wonder how hydrogen and other green sources of energy are going to be incorporated into our future strategies and policies. Yes, when it comes to charging stations, charging infrastructure, it presents a major challenge to us. In PDP 8, Power Development Plan number 8, the growth of the EV market outpaces policy development. So I wonder if we need to revise PDP 8 or if produce more reasonable plan. Because if the production of EVs progresses so rapidly and the charging infrastructure cannot keep up with it, then I don't think it will be a good balance to strike in our country. Let's have from French Electricity Corporation and Mr. Tuyên, another expert is here today, have mentioned, I don't want to show off towards experts like them, but I believe that, as mentioned by Mick, how we need to work on our existing infrastructure and our legal framework, at least make them ready before we let the EV market grow too fast. We can't take the shortcut. Thank you very much, Mr. Hadang-sun, for your explanation of I hope that in the coming time, as the electricity law is revised, more clearer provisions will be included to allow companies to sell electricity. Well, I think we're still craving for more, but our craving can be saved for another workshop, another dialogue. We still want to talk about definition of what is considered green energy, or the revision of the electricity law, the land law, and so many other laws. And as these revised drafts are being put out in the future, we still need to organize more platforms to discuss them. In the audience, we have DOT from Hà Tĩnh, Lạc Sơn, Huế, and I'm sure that they have their own experiences that they want to share, but the time is limited. And Mr. Kiên told me to conclude this event today on his behalf. So, MC, do you allow me to deliver the concluding remarks right now? All right, with her permission, I would like to conclude our policy dialogue today. Today, we have talked and discussed in great detail on how to best support manufacturers, assemblers, and especially users, how to support their transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. There are so many things that have been done from last year to this year. These achievements have been recognized by VAMA, an industry association, and so many experts here. And even PDP 8, Power Development Plan number 8, itself is shocked by the development and the growth of EVs. With that, I would like to thank you for staying until the very end, and even those who have left us already, especially thank you for staying here until the very end of the National Policy Dialogue. I would like to thank our guest speakers, my lovely panelists, for your insights. I wish all of you good health and a good one. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Phước Việt